in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Psych. Network complex. Okay. So now that we've redeemed ourselves with regards to sound, how is everybody doing? Let's get something out of the way. Click that like button, click that subscribe button. Okay, if you haven't already, and click the bell button twice, ladies and gentlemen. Los Angeles Unified School District, one of the largest school districts in the United States, is keeping the mask mandate. We're going to be having this conversation. And yes, DISC, the Distributed Idea Suppression Complex, it should be, not Idea Suppression Network. My bad. But that's what we're going to be talking about today through this whole mask saga. Now, the Unified School District, they initially said they were going to follow the state guidelines, but the state of California, as of March 11th, no longer mandates masks in schools, but LA Unified School District is keeping it on. Okay. So that will be shared. Let's see. Let's start it this way. Okay. I have a little piece of content here from ABC News from our friends at the mainstream media. Our friends at the mainstream media. Let's go.
And we're very glad to be back, at least with outdoor.
Ago, the World Health Organization made a landmark announcement declaring COVID-19 a worldwide pandemic. Schools and businesses were shut down. Hospital beds in California and across the nation quickly filling up with patients, the virus killing millions.
It was
Now the initial volley there, that what do you guys think about that? Because this is supposedly a piece of news here that's going to be telling us about the decisions of the Los Angeles Unified School District with regards to masks, the mask mandate. They begin, though, just to remind us of what, of the horror and the devastation and whatnot, just in case we forget how much danger we were all in, and perhaps probably still are all in from the 91 DVOC, right? That's an interesting beginning to all this, I would say.
was just an exceptional period. We had converted nearly every usable space. We really had no idea what we were dealing with. We had no protection.
Now that the rate of hospitalizations and virus transmission has dropped significantly, the state of California has decided to lift its indoor mask mandate for schools. But
Okay. The numbers dropping significantly. It's a good observation. Now, we're going to look at some numbers later on from the CDC and whatnot. But okay, numbers have dropped, but still, Los Angeles Unified School District is keeping the mandate. But we haven't even gotten there yet. Let's take a step back. Okay. Remember, I said that as of March 11th, okay, according to the latest health guidance from Governor Gavin Newsom, he has joined the governor of Oregon and Washington now, so all through the West Coast here, in going from mandate to strongly recommend. Okay, so the mask now is just it's a strong recommendation, which begs the question, like, what exactly does that mean? And is it perhaps just a stepping stool downwards towards, perhaps a face saving mechanism, showing perhaps not a there's a lack of there seems to be a lack of bravery in in all of this. But that might be a sidebar. But remember, California, okay? What exactly can we say about this strong recommendation thing? When will it, like, what does it mean and when will it go away? What exactly are you supposed to do with it? Well, let's see.
districts can make their own decisions. Parents of students in the LA Unified District are wondering when their kids will be allowed to take the facial coverings off.
I think it's time. If it's time for us adults to take them off, I think it's time for the children to take them off.
Online learning was a nightmare, and we're very glad to be back, at least with outdoor unmasking now. But we can't wait till everybody's unmasked if they're okay with that.
Tonight, LAUSD officials issued a statement saying they're still working with labor partners, including the teachers union, to transition from requiring indoor masking to strongly recommending it. That means when kids go back to classrooms in Los Angeles on Monday, they will have to keep their masks on. Some parents say they aren't ready for a change in the
Hmm. Okay. Let me make sure I got that right.
And we're very glad to be back, at least with outdoor unmasking now. But we can't wait till everybody's unmasked if they're okay with that.
Tonight, LAUSD officials issued a statement saying they're still working with labor partners, including the teachers union, to transition from requiring indoor masking to strongly recommending it. That means when kids go back to class,
Okay, so they're working on the transition. So they haven't transitioned from uh mandating to strongly recommending it. So I think that the school ground would be a good test case for what exactly does it mean to strongly recommend to kids that they wear masks. The whole idea, and perhaps I'm a little obtuse here or crazy, but that whole idea of strong recommendation is a bit off. So they're doing the transition. They haven't transitioned yet. They're not ready yet. Okay. They're not ready to say no to the masks. Now, this brings to light certain issues worth noting about bureaucracies, right? Because this is, after all, a bureaucracy, a large one, the Unified School District, as I said. Los Angeles County is one of the largest counties in the United States, right there in Southern California, sunny SoCal. With bureaucracies, one of the Byzantine general problems that I think Dr. Thunder brought up a couple of times in our conversation, because the Byzantine general problem is also the way to describe how the blockchain, the what the Bitcoin blockchain solved, the problem that the Bitcoin blockchain solved in a kind of with that whole trustless situation. But basically, in a bureaucracy, there's distribution or diffusion of responsibility, right? By definition, a bureaucracy is diffusion of responsibility. You're going to apply things equally. You're going to be very passive. It's not my job. Okay. It's not your job, whatever. We have to follow. So that diffusion of responsibility leads to a lot of what we might call cowardly behavior. Okay. So diffusion of responsibility just basically means that, hey, when there's a crowd of people watching a robbery go on, for example, it is less likely that if someone will actually intervene from the crowd as opposed to if it's just one person that watches the robbery. If two people watch a robbery, they'll intervene. If 100 people watch a robbery, they'll just stand there. We all know that, right? Now, within democracies, this is a huge thing. Plus the Byzantine general problem, whereby you don't necessarily know who the narc is. You don't know who the snitch is. You don't know who is listening. You don't know who's going to cancel you. This is not worth it anyways. It's not worth my pension and blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to apply logic or reasoning here, right? Because again, diffusion of responsibility, Byzantine general problem, leading to a trust issue. No one wants to be the nail that is sticking out. These are common things with bureaucracies, and these are the things that we see when we see these kinds of decisions. When we hear phrases such as strongly recommend, going away from our mandate now to the strongly recommend, and then maybe later carefully sweep it under the rug when we remove the strong recommendation, perhaps. This is what the system almost has to look like. Even if, let's say it was an AI system, let's say we were ruled by artificial intelligence, would it be different? Let's say the Los Angeles school district was AI. What decisions would it have made? Would it have done something similar? So I don't think it would have changed much. Now then you're talking about like the training data that is used for the AI is basically our bias data, is just copying us. That could be said too. But I think that bureaucracies just kind of mimic AI. It's not necessarily the reverse. I think they're acting in the AI kind of way. But anyways, let's continue, okay? As I said, Governor Gavin Newsom joined the governor of Oregon and Washington in moving from the mandate towards the strong recommendation as of March 11th. But Los Angeles School District is still in the middle of doing that transition. And this beginning ABC News here, they made sure they reminded us how dire things are, okay? Or
Schools
were.
in Los Angeles on Monday, they will have to keep their masks on. Some parents say they aren't ready for a change in the rules.
I think it should be anyone's choice. I'm not against it or for it.
Oh, I would.
Anyone's choice. I'm not against it or for it.
That should be a soundbite. That should be like the whenever that's the it's subjective button. So shout out to Chuku Igwe in the building. Shout out to K Polymath in the building. Dr. Thunder. Some comments have already been put on the board that I will be highlighting. Dr. Thunder hit us with one right from the very beginning. And as we go here, because I said this is going to be a loose conversation about the way in which truth, misinformation, disinformation is permeated or suppressed, narratives are formed, and what have you. The sense making organisms that the Overton window, right? Take, for example, the lab leak hypothesis. At some point, it was crazy. You would have to be a tinfoil hat wearing lunatic in order to say something like the lab leak hypothesis. But then a few months later, they moved that into the Overton window where it's like, okay, now it's okay to say it. This shows you something which is interesting, which is, you don't have to control that the time horizon now is so small. You don't have to control the narrative for all eternity. It's not like, oh, and then I have to write the history books, and I was like no, you have to control the narrative for about like a 2 month window or 1 month window, and you can just keep on shifting it. Okay, the Overton window moves a lot faster in certain regards now, is what I am saying. Okay, but Dr. Thunder begs to differ. Okay, saying that a lot of this should have been stopped months ago, and that this AI bureaucratic, I'm not going to be a nail that sticks out. I'm not going to be the one that does something. Okay, I don't really care anyway. This is not really worth. There's diffusion of responsibility. It's not my job. That kind of thing. That should have not been done. Instead, perhaps it should have been more courage exercised at the level of like certain governors. Perhaps I'm sure you can find examples of governors and school districts. Okay, as perhaps we'll dig into the data and find people who think differently about this. And all the while, we have to watch and remember how the story and the narrative shifts, even in this very five short clip we've watched. Let's start it again from the beginning and notice how they set the frame. Okay. They didn't start with right now. They didn't say, okay, cool, knowing everything that you know. They didn't say, hey, Taboo Smash, hey, you listening right now with your expensive headphones. They didn't say you know what you know about 2020 and 2021, and now we're in 2022. Okay, cool. So here's where we're at with masks. As we know, we're pulling things back. LA Unified School District, though, is saying they're not going to do it. No, they didn't say that. They didn't do that. Here's what they did in this news clip. And I think it's a good thing that highlights our whole point of narratives and sense making, suppression, and whatnot. Let's see.
Exactly 2 years ago, the World Health Organization made a landmark announcement declaring COVID 19 a worldwide pandemic.
You see? So taking you back to the how landmark, how much of a landmark event it was, how monumentous it was, and let's see.
Schools and businesses were shut down. Hospital beds in California and across the nation quickly filling up with patients, the virus killing millions.
The virus killing millions. Okay, so this is setting the table upon which you're supposed to feast on some further, perhaps, BS and about why it is perfectly okay for the Los Angeles school district to just say, we're going to keep them wearing masks. Yes, when they come back, they're going to be wearing masks still, right? Now, what did they just do there? Because there's something about the data, that millions data, right? While the millions data was being gathered, there was a lot of controversy, legitimate controversy regarding how the nature of the data, the quality of the data, the attribution of 91 DVOC as the cause of death, right? Okay, cause of death, 91 DVOC. We remember those numbers, don't we? We remember the arguments about the numbers. But now it can just be folded into a nice little intro that tells you millions were killed by the virus on their way to telling you something else, by the way, which is just a total non sequitur, as if they had to remind you what this thing is. As if you don't have to now have to worry about your so in the past it was phone, key, and wallet. In the past, okay, so no, if you go way back, okay, if you go to the 90s, it was your wallet and your keys, okay, and then it became phone, key, wallet, and then now it's phone, key, wallet, and mask for the past couple of years, right? So like they had to remind you. No, they were not trying to remind you. They were just trying to frame the whole story. They were trying to say, hey, look, this stuff happened, and millions were killed, okay? And this is how it's going to go down, and this is why and how. So let's start one more time and run it through just real quick, and then we'll continue with regards to the nature of, shall we say, bureaucracies, the nature of the dissemination of information, how information is consumed by people, and how they behave, and how the algorithm. Don't forget to click the like button. Don't forget to hit the super chat, subscribe if you already, if you're new, that is. If you haven't already done so, I should say. So let's see. Let's go through this one more time.
Exactly 2 years ago, the World Health Organization made a landmark announcement declaring COVID 19 a worldwide pandemic. Schools and businesses were shut down. Hospital beds in California and across the nation quickly filling up with patients, the virus killing millions.
It was just an exceptional period. We had converted nearly every usable space. We really had no idea what we were dealing with. We had no protection.
Now that the rate of hospitalizations and virus transmission has dropped significantly, the state of California has decided to lift its indoor mask mandate for schools, but districts can make their own decisions. Parents of students in the LA Unified District are wondering when their kids will be allowed to take the facial coverings off.
I think it's time. If it's time for us adults to take them off, I think it's time for the children to take them off.
All right, she sounds a little reasonable.
Online learning was a nightmare, and we're very glad to be back, at least with outdoor unmasking now. But we can't wait till everybody's unmasked if they're okay with that.
Tonight, LA
Homeboy had to say if they're okay with that. Let's hear that again. Pay attention, right?
And we're very glad to be back, at least with outdoor unmasking now. But we can't wait till everybody's unmasked if they're okay with that.
Like I just have to remind everybody, I'm not trying to force you to do anything and whatnot and whatnot. Well, it didn't have to be said.
Tonight, LAUSD officials issued a statement saying they're still working with labor partners, including the teachers union, to transition from requiring indoor masking to strongly recommending it. That means when kids go back to classrooms in Los Angeles on Monday, they will have to keep their masks on. Some parents say they aren't ready for a change in the rules.
I think it should be anyone's choice. I'm not against it or for it.
Oh, I want them to keep it on.
Okay, so this is the other thing that our friends in the media like to do, right? Which is this on the one hand, on the other hand. People like to call it a false equivalency problem, right? You can always find somebody to say something, to be on the other side. If people are 100% on any issue, and that's North Korea, right? What I mean is you're under a dictatorship if you agree on everything, right? So the idea is in a democracy, most things are 60-40, 70-30. But when you get 100% on something, well, then you're okay. So point being, they go find somebody else to say the other side, which in your experience, let's do a quick, very unscientific poll amongst the three of you. In your experience, put a 1 in the chat if you know people that want to keep the mask on, and put a 2 in the chat, okay, if you don't know anybody. 2 if you don't know anybody. 1 if you know somebody that wants to keep the mask on. It is relevant because this ABC piece of work, this news here that we've seen so far, not only did it start with reminding you, painting the picture in a very particular way as to what exactly we're talking about, as though we don't know, painting a particular narrative, putting a particular mood and a tone, making certain things unquestionable, if you will, and then rushing through this, and then getting to this point, and then saying, "Oh, look, there's some other people, by the way, who would rather keep the masks." That I would assume so. I assume also that there are people who want to ban cars, automobiles, or uh, roads and things like that. You can find people who think and can say all kinds of things. Is it representative? Is it relevant enough? Is there a critical mass of these people Is it relevant at all to the decision made by Los Angeles Unified School District to keep the mask mandate? Was this a poll, like, done by in a medical situation? What does it matter? The vote and the feelings of people, regardless, right? So the idea is LA Unified School District, the adults in the room, right, are supposed to make a decision. They came up with a decision. They said, hey, we're going to keep the mask mandate for the time being. And it's supposed to be based on sound reasoning, right? And after they do all this kabuki theater in front of you, now they're bringing other people, making it seem like, oh, on the one hand, and then there's these other people who say this other thing. You see, it's like you don't go and take a poll about surgery, about whether or not you're going to keep your left kidney or if they're going to take it off. You don't leave that up to public opinion, or you don't leave it up to a TikTok poll. You don't just find somebody on the street and say, hey, what do you think? Surgery or no surgery? Okay? This is a medical situation. Also, it is as important, as a matter of fact, because with surgery, you're talking about one person, but when you're talking about pandemics, if you will, viruses, pathogens of all kinds, very important. So why then is it subject to the feelings of, I think, people, I think we should keep the mask. So this whole piece here of work, this little news clip which we just watched, which, by the way, is it's the norm, right? It's not like they were doing anything crazy here. They weren't even trying to spin here. This is just their regular spin. This is just their regular output. Okay? Now, if you consume that kind of thing uncritically, then the real Dana will call you a mental slave. or Dr. Thunder might say, well, maybe you're lazy or something like that. Or, anyways, shout out to the people in the building. I'm going to drop the link in case anybody, as we continue with the information here, we're going to look at some more information over here, perhaps look at other people who came up with other decisions, and people who for a long time have been saying, hey, look at the deleterious effect, look at the bad effects, right? The maladaptations that can result from masking children. Speech recognition, facial patterns, the ability to really communicate in a learning environment where that's what's going on, right? And we know a lot of that communication stuff goes in the face. Not to talk about the health implications, right? And so on and so forth. Or should I say, etc. Because that is also out there too. Those considerations, those are the real considerations, are they not? Not whether somebody says, oh, it's subjective. Well, at least the subjective, lady here that says, it doesn't matter whether you do it or not. At least the libertarians might like her.
Children to take them off.
Online learning was a nightmare, and we're very glad to be back, at least with outdoor unmasking now. But we can't wait till everybody's unmasked if they're okay with that.
Tonight, LAUSD officials issued a statement saying they're still working with labor partners, including the teachers union, to transition from requiring indoor masking to strongly recommending it. That means when kids go back to classrooms in Los Angeles on Monday, they will have to keep their masks on. Some parents say they aren't ready for a change in the rules.
I think it should be anyone's choice. I'm not against it or for it.
Oh, I want them to keep it on. I do. Why? Personally. Yeah, tell me why. Why? Because it's still out there, the virus.
Because it's still out there, the virus. I like that with the perfect. Let's hear
Anyone's
that
choice.
again.
I'm not against it or for it.
Oh, I want them to keep it on. I do. Why? Personally. Yeah, tell me why. Why? Because it's still out there, the virus.
you know, you know, it's because it's still out there. Ah, that's good stuff. Why they have to put her on the spot like that? Tell us exactly why you want to keep these masks. This is still out there.
Choice. I'm not against it or for it.
Oh, I want them to keep it on. I do. Personally. Yeah, tell me why. Why? Because it's still out there, the virus, and just to be safe.
So that's all. That's all they've got. That's all they've got, huh? So they did mention, that hospitalizations have been going way down. Okay, so let's see a couple of things here. Across the state, drop their face coverings. Okay, several K through 12 across the state. Los Angeles is being quite different about it. I see. Okay, LAUSD, the second largest school district in the country. The second largest school district in the country, right there in the Los Angeles Coast Valley, my old stomping grounds, said it does not want to drop the mask requirement yet. Okay, as it works towards a plan. Now, what is the nature of working towards a plan in order to say no more masks? Like, what are the steps, Dr. Thunder? What are the steps, Dr. K Polymath? Or how many engineers, architects do we need to get lawyers involved? What is the project involved with, saying masks or no masks? What do you think they're planning? What do you think they're trying to unroll the unmasking process? It's in a 17-point plan, and it takes 3 months, to really unravel this plan here. So they're working towards a plan with partners, including teacher unions, and this might include certain kinds of deals that they may have made, with regards to teachers unions and the whole, shall we say, 91 DVOC situation, right, and whatnot, to move away from mandates and towards strongly recommending, okay, masks. So the signs that inform the unramp to the protective protocols. Someone is full of you know someone is full of BS when when they give you something like the signs that inform the unramp of the protective protocols. Okay, basically meaning the reasons why we decided to wear the masks, right? Making it seem now as though there was a clear science. Okay, because remember, again, we have our memory of what happened. Now, no, human memory is not that great either way, but at least you can say I have my memory, and you can check it against the memory that video just tried to give you. The video tried to give you a particular view and millions dead and that kind of a snapshot, and then it went into all this okey doke about other people say, that they want the mask and whatnot. And then you have someone saying the science that informed the unramp of the protective protocols currently in place. The science that informed the unramp of the protective protocols currently in place. Nothing was quite clear. It was the fog of war. There was masks don't work. Don't worry about masks. Remember that time that they said that? Because they were trying to save the mask for medical people. And then it was like, oh, now wear the mask and blah, blah, blah. The fog of war, this study, that study, all these kinds of things. And then all of a sudden making it seem like it's this, oh, yeah, the science that informed the protocol, that solid body of knowledge, that clear path, that thing we all figured out together, that thing that we were, told from on high, right? That it was quite clear, right? That is what this statement here, the science that informed the on-ramp to the protective protocols currently in place, which is to ensure the well-being of our students. Okay? By the way, our protocols, okay, and this thing which we're still deciding to hold on to, okay, it ensured the well-being of our students. 100%. I can say that because Hey, because why not? Now, it'd be one thing to be honest about how one gets to a point, all the tinkering and in other words, the reality of how you bump up against things. As I said earlier, the fog of war. Things are not supposed to be clear or straight. It's never that way. So trying to airbrush very recent history to make it seem as though it was clear cut, straightforward. Oh, all that stuff that just happened, that didn't happen. This is what happened right now. Remember, I was talking about the Overton window and how the time is now narrowed. So, what you're going to notice is that, these people are going to be telling you that things that you experienced 2 months ago never happened, or that's not how it happened, or that's not how we arrived at these numbers, or those numbers. Oh, I never said that. Those kinds of things. It's no longer going to be old history that gets airbrushed. Last week is going to start getting airbrushed. And then soon, before you know it, like the whole day, within a day, the story has changed as to what the Overton window is. What is the bandwidth of allowable truths beyond which you get accused of misinformation and other possible cancelable offenses, right? That Overton window moves very quickly now, such that a few months ago, lab leak theory, you're crazy. Now, lab leak theory, makes sense. It's plausible, actually more plausible than the others. And it makes perfect sense. Where else would it come from? That kind of a thing. Accidents happen all the time at labs, all that kind of stuff. But when you said it a few months ago, it's like, oh, well, you're crazy. So let's continue, anyways, down the path with the Los Angeles School District folks here. Basically saying that the signs that inform the on-ramp of the protective protocols currently in place, which have ensured the well-being of our students and our workforce, must too inform the off-ramp. So they're consulting the science. They're out there consulting the oracles of the science to tell them how they should off-ramp themselves out of this particular place that they're in. Now, this obviously doesn't mean anything, but it is put right there in front of you as official statements. And then this particular ABC News reel that we just watched was presented to you as reality, and by reality I mean as reasonable, right? That they're telling you that what they just told you and the whole narrative they just gave you, and they're reminding you of, oh my God, how horrible it was, and showing you this other person telling you about, oh well, I think they should keep the masks, and then this one saying, I think it should be anybody's choice, that kind of a thing, as though it were up to so decisions like this, which are in essence medical decisions, community health decisions, are subject to the whims of every third lady in the street that dropped off their school or their kid at school, right? So all that is supposed to make sense is the point. And this is the well from which many get their sustenance, the food for their soul, their ideas, their thoughts, where they get programmed, where they get told the feelings to have through the thoughts and the images, the words and the sounds and the images, the triggering things that they've told them and the ways that they've made them feel. This is how that happens. However, let's continue. Let's see what else here, how Los Angeles is defending itself, because it has given us some spiel about the science that informed the protective protocols that has ensured the health of our people. So let's see this. What does this say? Los Angeles Unified School District need to acknowledge where we are with health conditions in our district and in our school communities. Okay. So haven't said nothing so far. And then going into the science about the on-ramp should also inform, right? Inform the off-ramp. And then what did they say next? Los Angeles Unified School District to take science-based approach. Okay. They're going to take a science-based approach. You hear that? You hear that, people? This is the voodoo, right? And the voodoo is not that spectacular. That's the thing about it. It's just boring, mundane, stupid stuff. The okey doke is not even clever, right? The voodoo, the word magic, all that crap is not even clever. The invoking of this god called science, right? And which we know in our real experience and even as scientists, right? And I'm science adjacent, I'm an engineer. We know that science is tinkering, it's engineering, it's trying to figure something out. And then you bump up and you figure something else out. And then you continue to add, you build the model. And then you go to mathematics department and you say, hey, you guys have some kind of mathematical object with which I can model this thing? And you borrow from there and then you move on and then you see what works, what doesn't work. We were talking yesterday about varying levels of confidence of information, of data that you have, an error bar, in other words. There is no such thing as a measurement without an error bar. Like if I tell you, hey, the distance from here to the store is 5 miles. If I don't tell you plus or minus 250 feet or something like that, then that's not useful information. Because there's a big difference between telling you something is 50 miles plus or minus 2 miles versus it's 50 miles plus or minus 1 feet. I mean, does that make sense? Because I think that thing about the fact that every measurement needs to have an uncertainty, as long as we live in reality, in order for it to make sense, right? In other words, that thing can be clearly kind of embodied when I tell you that you have to walk somewhere or drive somewhere. It's 50 miles plus or minus 4 miles versus I tell you it's 50 miles plus or minus 1 foot. And my data has to have error bars like this. All information, all measurements have to have these things, right? There is no such thing as I just give you a number and I don't tell you the plus or minus, where the fuzz is, those kinds of things. So that fuzz and mixed in with all this uncertainty that we experienced is the process of science and is the process of updating and going through. But they will tell you that there's something called a science-based approach that they're taking. Okay, after having exposed themselves in many ways as being fumblers of the ball, bad liars, filled with misinformation themselves. Who are they? Now, who are the they? I'm just talking about sense-making organisms such as the ABC news thing that you just watched, governmental organizations such as this one that you're reading, right? So I'm not accusing anyone indirectly. I'm saying this person said this thing, and this is the BS that they're telling. This is in their words, right? This is their words, their decisions, their terms. They're the ones that say things such as we're moving from mandate to strong recommendations and other kind of crazy speak like that. Not me. I'm not making it up, right? We are not making it up. But shout out to the super chat in the building. And I also mentioned before that you guys are making many great points down there in the chat that need to be incorporated one way or the other into this conversation. Spiritual logic in the building, always holding it down, always representing. Okay, the muzzle. Okay, the muzzle covering up your mouth, shutting you down. The muzzle, I'm assuming, is psychological warfare to train the masses to submit to authority. Okay, and that's what we saw in the beginning of that video. That was a muzzling technique, saying, hey, millions died. It was a horrible thing. Oh, it was a tragedy. Now, here's what we're going to do about it. And we're going to then take a science-based approach, and the signs that informed the current protective protocols need to be followed for the off-ramping. When you start saying things like off-ramping and on-ramping and protocols, you know you're already full of BS. You're talking as though we're not talking about something which is a visceral part of our lives now. We're talking about wear a mask or not. You don't have to talk that way if I'm telling you about forks, spoons, and dinner. I don't say, well, the feeding implements, the pronged feeding implements seem to be doing well in terms of our sales, but the scoopers, no, we don't talk that way when we're being straight about things that we know. And as I said, the mask is now one of the three. It used to be key, phone, and wallet. Soon it's just going to be the chip in your wrist. Then you don't have to carry anything. You don't need your keys, you don't need a wallet, and you don't need a phone. You see, that's the beauty of the mark of the beast, ladies and gentlemen, is you don't have to worry about none of that. Anyways. Oh, I guess I'm having too much fun here. Indeed, indeed, indeed. So let's continue to see what they say. Okay. Keeping the mask mandate. What are their reasons? So far, they've given us a bunch of babble, and they're going to end with this whole science-based thing. Anyways, okay, so Los Angeles Unified School District, okay, continues to take a science-based approach to COVID-19 policy and is currently working with labor partners and other establishments to transform the required indoor masking to a strong recommendation to indoor masking aligned with the current guidance from the state of California. Okay, cool. The state of California, as we said, Governor Gavin Newsom has already moved from the mandate to a strong recommendation, along with the governor of Washington and Oregon, right? So far, still full of BS. And they're quoting that same thing again. And LAUSD did not indicate when the mask mandate might be lifted, it says. Did not indicate that. COVID-19, the 91 DVOC cases and hospitalizations in California have been declining for several weeks. Okay, something that we know. Okay, and again, we have here the CDC data, Center for Disease Control, saying that the rolling average, okay, 7-day rolling average. So within a 7-day chunk, from 7 days ago till now, how many people have got it? 4,625 is what they're saying, it seems. That seems rather low. Okay, it says as of March 11th, the 7-day rolling average for cases was 4,625. I wonder if that's new cases being reported or something like that. To the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The lowest number, okay, recorded since December of 2021. So it seems like there's been a further decline. And similarly, the 7-day average for virus-related hospitalizations, okay. I wonder what the related part of that virus-related statement is. Because we all know, because we remember when they told us about the millions, right? We remember how we were questioned and how some of those questions were those numbers were questioned. And this, by the way, if there's one thing that comes out of this, partly, is I think that it taught people a lot about the nature of numbers and that silly thing that we like to call statistics, right? So let's not call it statistics for a while. Let's just call it information gathering. In other words, forget whether I tell you about the mean or the mode or the median or the average, or I start comparing standard deviations, I start making bell curves and stuff like that. Okay? Start talking about percentiles. I don't even do any of that. I just give you a number. I just say, hey, 100 people were hospitalized for COVID-related X, Y, or Z. All I do is just give you a number. Okay? I think what a lot of people started to realize is, oh, even just one simple number can be questioned, because the question is, how did you gather that number? What does it mean related? Okay. What was the quality of the information gathering system? Because somebody had to put it in to a computer. And where's the error bar in your method of collection? Let's say it was some kind of oral transmission, or somebody has to check something on a form, or somebody has to put something in a keyboard. These are physical activities, right? These are things that have to happen, of which there's a certain kind of error rate associated with that too, right? So how are you defining the number? How are you collecting it? How are you actually literally putting it in? What is the error and fuzziness with regards to the conceptualization of the number to begin with, and then through the collection, and so on and so on and so on and so on, is something that at least I think was evident in a lot of information. Because when we were looking at the 91 DVOC deaths, people were saying, oh, well, it seems to be more of a skateboard accident than that cracked open his head, than the fact that he had some virus in there that caused this death. So how's it still 91 DVOC related? And here's the other thing. Just because somebody is collecting data and they say, you know what, if anybody that comes through this hospital, if they test positive for this and they pass away, I want you to check this box. That is not a bad thing. Okay? Spiritual logic. Is it a bad thing if I say, as a data collecting person, I haven't said what I'm going to use with it yet. I'm not saying I'm going to what I'm going to tell people. I'm just going to say, okay, cool. In order to gather data, anyone that passes away with and they have that, I want that number. Give me that number. That's not a bad thing. But you know what that number is. That number is just the raw came through my hospital, passed away, and tested for this thing. That's what that is. Doesn't tell you anything about. Definitely the last thing it tells you is that that's what killed them, right? Okay? So it's not a bad thing to collect these levels of data, but it's a question of understanding critically when it is fed to you. Like when you give me a number, say, hey, this number. No, I got to ask you, what does this number mean? And how was it actually collected? Okay? It just means kind of some loose concept, and we collected it by just asking people coming out of the grocery store, and they said yes or no, and we collected the numbers, and that's it, right? So I think that's one thing that we definitely learned in this situation. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, the super chat button is working. The spiritual logic has already made us all too aware of that. And again, make sure you share the stream. It helps a lot. Okay. Do me a solid. Share the stream. Drop it in your group text. Drop it in your WhatsApp group or whatever, however you kids are communicating these days. Instagram. Okay. So I put something in the description. I called it the distributed idea suppression complex. And what is that? Well, that's an idea of one of those acronyms by Eric Weinstein. Eric Weinstein is a mathematician / physicist / economist / none of these. And he talks about the distributed idea suppression network. Okay. Because again, what this shows us, what we've watched this video, we've seen this kind of speak here about numbers, about the virus, about decisions made. We have seen people come out and say things like, well, the science that informed the current protective protocols and the unramping of those must also inform the off-ramping without necessarily telling you anything. Okay. And BSing you about something as now real and visible to us as masks, right? Like, why are you talking to me like that about masks? Anyways, this way of suppressing certain ideas, telling you certain things didn't happen, as we're talking about, like, also the Overton window and how it tends to happen, and how in the bureaucratic sense of things, there is a diffusion of responsibility aspect, Byzantine general problem, and other problems in there that have to do with rigidity and stubbornness in a bureaucracy. Okay, their guilt makes them rigid and stubborn, and they say it's not my problem, it's not my job, and that's human nature under such bureaucratic regimes and structures. Okay, diffusion of responsibility happens, none of these other things happen, but it's not a concerted effort. We see patterns, but the distributed idea suppression complex, we shall continue with that conversation as we continue here with the 91 DVOP, because Los Angeles Unified School District, the second largest school district in the nation, has decided that they are going to keep the mask mandates. Yes. So the link is in the chat. And what you got for us, sir?
Yeah, salam alaikum wa barakatuh, brother. How are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll see. But I have a question. Can you give an example of this something that we've seen in the mainstream or the zeitgeist of this suppression idea network thing going on? I want a landscape of it so that we can understand what it really means.
Epstein. Need I say more?
Okay, and also Prince, is it Prince Richard or something? The other prince in the
Okay,
UK.
so
right?
let's so first of all, I'm gonna take a step
Okay,
back.
that's actually no. Never mind. I won't say anything about UK. Epstein is fine. We can talk about that.
Oh yeah, you can talk about UK. Or maybe you don't want to.
No, because I don't want to be part of that.
Okay.
I don't want them to.
I'll take a step back.
suppress
I'll take a
me
step back
and
now.
my.
So you're asking, hey, distributed idea suppression network. It's called the DISC, okay? And it's that thing that. So what am I claiming that it does, or what is the claim that it does? Well, it is that thing that tells you that the lab leak hypothesis is crazy, and then 3 months later says, lab leak hypothesis is perfectly fine. On the labs things leak from lab all the time, and it's actually quite plausible, more plausible than certain other alternatives, as a matter of fact. Now, so that's the thing. Some people call it the matrix, that which puts you under mental slavery, whatever it is, the mind control, blah, blah, blah. That'd be a more acute manifestation of this distributed idea suppression complex. Now, an example, that's your question, right? And I said Epstein. And then you said the England thing. But I want to use an example that comes out of the England thing, which was a particular news network, okay? Because these sense-making organs are in the media, whether it be old media or social media, mainstream or otherwise. They're in academia, right? And then they're in all kinds of propaganda organs of the government, okay? And then also they're in private corporations because they have to do their marketing and their programming of you as well, right? And sometimes these organs come into concerted effort, and sometimes they go away. In other words, the distributed idea suppression complex therefore has to exist. This is the substrate upon which it has to exist, right? So in this particular case now, we're talking about in the media, okay? Actively recorded, right? And I don't know if you remember this story, that it was recorded but by a hot mic, as they say, that, oh, we cannot talk about this particular Epstein thing because we want to get a interview with Meghan Markle. Do you remember that story? In the United States, a media company, okay, so clear example, clear as day. You say, oh, well, how does this thing happen? What is the distributed idea suppression complex? Okay, cool. Clear as day, right in front of your nose. Due to motivations, which we clearly understand too, they said, hey, no, you can't say this. Actively suppressed, right? Because of that. So does that answer your question? And where are you taking us with this? You have another question?
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, how much or how sure is it that it can evolve into the generalized concept where, let's say, America or any country with media prowess to be able to basically do things and make us forget about these things, and then continue to keep and maintain their own the perception of others as them being the morally supreme, let's say, country in the world. How relevant is this DISC network?
Now, the way you ask the question suggests that you have ideas about it. So why don't you tell me what you think about how likely it is, or how and such and such? Why don't you introduce? Because go ahead, you answer your question. Let me turn it on you. I already answered one of yours.
Okay. So an example that I might be thinking of is in a more global sense is that, let's say, America has been the only country to actually use so-called nuclear weapons in anger, so in a way to actually cause fatality. And then they use a really bad logic to justify, oh, we had to end the war, which doesn't quite make sense. And then we all fall for it. They teach it in schools. They suppress other kind of dissent of, hang on, is that really the most effective way to end it? And then also, they're the ones who have really, put false wars on places like Iraq. But for some reason, we forget about it. And we did forget about it. So they consistently involve themselves in all these things, but because of the media and the focus on the fact that the brown man in Middle East is actually the most dangerous thing out there, we then still kind of move around thinking, okay, America is doing great. America is not so bad, even though it's right in front of us. So if you look at the media only reports on certain cases, reports with certain biases, and is so in your face. An example where this kind of broke a little bit is during this Ukraine invasion. If you look at how, some people literally broke. some people literally said, "Oh, it's terrible. Blonde-eyed, blue-haired people. Sorry, blue-eyed, blonde-haired people were being killed. This is terrible. This is not like these third world XYZ in the Middle East and SHIT whole countries. They literally broke. These are people who haven't broken before in any other media representation, but they broke. So to me, I'm kind of seeing that this again, there's a narrative. It's pushing towards certain regions, areas, and concepts, and most of us are mental slaves of this disc. It's almost like we can't even begin to think in alternative mind thoughts. A simple example, while I finish my thought, is the Matrix. I know that I am in a tribal warfare. I choose UK because I would have chosen UK because I live in UK and I want to be safe in UK. My interests are UK, and I know that's all. But Americans and most people believe that there's some kind of moralistic, we are somehow right more than the other side, even though that's really not the case.
Okay, hold on a second. Yeah. Now, fine all the way. I don't like you were untidy there when you said you do something and then you compared yourself with Americans. That's not a good comparison. You know why that is too. These are very far distinct objects. Me versus a country. So there are types of people everywhere. Okay, I'm sure there are many Americans that think exactly the way you do. Now, the question is, there is a unique way in which the information is quote unquote hidden. Because let me tell you something right now. You can go to Spiritual Logic's channel right now, okay? Spiritual Logic, aka Hulk, and you can find out just about whatever you want to find out about what you may think is hidden or not hidden. Also, the point is, there's always a surface level of I'm going to attempt to polish information. We just together reviewed an ABC news clip, right? Where within 5 minutes they attempted to set your mood in a particular negative area, put you in an area of fear, and then told you some BS nonsense, nothing, and then showed you some lady that says that she thinks that we should keep on wearing masks, right? And that was just a basic, regular vanilla stuff for them. They weren't even really digging deep there. Okay, so there's always that surface level, but it's not like you and I are not also on this very channel talking about this, right? So there is the beauty, okay, of the American system, okay, is that it is tuned. It's kind of it is not very worried because its propaganda is very well tuned to the way the numbers will naturally break down in terms of natural slaves versus people whom are not natural slaves. So, if that makes sense. So, presumably, there are people whom are going to just be sheepish, okay? And then some who are not going to be so sheepish. So America doesn't, for those who are not so sheepish, America doesn't blatantly hide the information. Okay, right? Obviously not. Would you agree so far?
Correct.
Yeah. America does not blatantly hide the information. If you're somebody like Spiritual Logic or someone like Dr. Polymath or someone like Dr. Thunder that says, you know what, I'm going to find the truth. You're like, oh, truth? Right here. Okay? It'll pacify you with the truth. It'll give you the truth. However, it knows that when it puts just a little bit of that dirty sugar water in the water, enough of the normal slave people, the normal sheep, are gonna go for that thing. That it doesn't matter what you think. And if you come and say, "What do you mean? Oh, why you're deceiving the people?" They're like, "Deceive what? The truth is right there. I mean, you got the truth." Right? So you cannot claim suppression in a particular way. You cannot go, oh, the Communist Party is blocking my internet with firewall or this, that, or the other. It's like, no. So America is very, again, I like to talk about the Brave New World. America does the Brave New World style of mind control very well, is what I would say.
Okay, I see your point. But then, okay, so this disc, is there really a point then for Weinstein to have coined such a term when it already existed? It's just the Matrix.
No, Weinstein and the coining of terms is a phenomenon in and of itself, as I'm sure you know. That's not
Right.
his only term, right? So I think that has to be that context
The
has to be taken.
intellectual dark web.
All that stuff, the intellectual dark web, the disc. I think he has many. Okay, and I think as part of his propagandizing and part of his propaganda agency is to use those things. Okay, and now these are things he coined. It has cachet out there in the world. Maybe it influences people as well, but it's almost like also his calling cards, his little spots of influence and whatever.
Okay, I see. So, okay. Now, let's talk about this whole Coal Fleet 27
The
situation.
91 DVOC. Oh,
Yeah, that one.
The 72 DVOC. Okay.
Right. Yeah, so, well, actually, it sounds like a Russian word when you say DVOC. So, interesting. And you see what's happening right now.
You see, then that a 92 DVOC. I tell them so. Anyways, go ahead.
D-vodka.
Oh, they're like, what the hell are these? What are they laughing about? Go ahead. So we're talking about the DVOC.
Right. So since the beginning, I could see through everything, right? Everything. I looked at the numbers, I looked at the fear mongering, I looked at everything, and I could see right through it. To me, it didn't seem to make any effort or any difference. But to people, they felt this level of fear just because the government was saying it, not because of the science, because we know there are things which are worse scientifically and are actually happening now, especially where I'm from, in Africa, for example. Over here, flu kills people, malaria kills people, typhoid, dysentery, etc. But people are wearing masks in a fear of a random cold. It makes no sense to me at all. No matter how much I tell them, they can't. And again, it's the middle class. The poor people don't actually even believe it exists. Now, they're in a different extreme, right? But I actually think I'm more in line with them than the middle class educated people.
Welcome. Shout out to Spiritual Logic in the building, right? Yeah, I believe that is you, right?
Yeah, what's going on, man? What's going on?
We're doing well. I think you came in probably with something in mind, but I want you to answer this question first about the way in which I think Dr. Polymath came in and he asked me a question. He asked two questions, but it ended up being the way in which, okay, this idea suppression network, which, is our operating term today, keeps sheep, the way in which the matrix keeps whatever it may be, right? And then how would you answer that? Because it's not like communist China, it's not like the Soviet style stuff, it's not Nazi Germany, okay, right here where we are having this conversation, but still the mechanisms of keeping people in check and keeping the drones stays in place. Any comments about that?
Yeah, thank you for having me up. They control the flow of information. The whole idea of information being interpreted through institutions and not through our own testing, as if we don't have a mind to reason through our own reality. And so a lot of people have just renounced critical thinking and personal responsibility and have turned over their bodies and their health to be interpreted by institutions, attributing a sense of morality to, governing bodies, like they should care about you or they should have their best interests at heart outside of their own personal self-interest. And of course they do this. We all know that the media is a CIA arm of the government to control the flow of information, to determine which information is valid and what information is not. Because why else do they censor? If this is about science, which should be based on a logical scientific method of having a hypothesis, testing and doing a testable and repeatable experiment to test that hypothesis and draw a conclusion with results, then why is questioning an issue? Why can't you question the narrative? Why can't you, like, they're just restricting you to talk. Like, you can't question it. They can put the information out there, but you have to take it as they say it is. You cannot even reason through it. You can't challenge it. You can't do anything but just go with it. And so it's this full blown totalitarianism. It's just you
Do you
have to
put any
obey.
stock in the thing that some people may say about safety, about
Mhm.
I mean, the silly fire, crowded theater stuff, but it is the same thing, right? They're saying something about safety here. Now, for me personally, I tend not to see the whole safety thing one way or the other, right?
Mhm.
But I'm that kind of maybe overly selfish person. But
Right.
is there any safety argument to certain kinds of suppression of like, oh, yeah, you're fine, you can figure it out, but you can't tell the people this. The people need to follow this prescription because this is the best out possible outcomes for sheep. And you can do what you want to do, but this has been tested for sheep. This is sheep
Right,
stuff
right,
right here.
right. Man, I mean,
Go ahead.
nah, I mean, safety, that's a whole different issue because first of all, logically covering your mouth is just not logical. Like the fact that people ignore that, the worst thing you can do is restrict your breathing. And the second worst thing you can do is, there's an amount of metabolic waste that your body expels through cellular respiration, meaning that part of the breakdown of detoxifying the body is through your respiration, through you breathing out. And these things have to go out of your body. They can't sit in your sinus cavities, your mouth, or go back into your lungs. And if you notice that during the so-called pandemics of 1918 and such, the cause of death was bacterial pneumonia. It wasn't even what they said it was. And, pneumonia being simply, bacteria that's, even the whole germ theory thing is just crazy. I mean, we understand that this healthcare industry in this country is not about healing or cures. We understand the Rockefeller Foundation. There's a good video telling you how they suppress natural cures, and it's all about selling sickness. They have this on the NIH website. It's about selling sickness and convincing healthy people that they're sick. And so this is purely psychological. This is purely people who just want quick solutions, who want to vindicate themselves of responsibility. A society that's been indoctrinated to celebrate illogical behaviors and do everything out of just feeling and try to vindicate themselves of consequences. And so you have this healthcare industry that is capitalizing off the ignorance and just the foolishness of people, of not wanting to do right by themselves and still feel virtuous and still feel like I'm doing my part. Everybody's virtue signaling. I say this is more about pride and it's more about privileges and status than it is about health. Because look, I mean, even Mr. Fauci has on a 60-minute interview where he says there's no reason why anybody should be having a face covering on. He says this, and this was, I think, in March when this first started, or even April or something like that of 2020. And so he said this. He says, and the guy, the host, challenged him, and he said, "Are you sure?" Because everybody's listening. He said, "Yeah, there's no. It may make you feel better, but it's basically doing nothing." And then they're evolving. They're so-called changing. Not this. This is not even science. This is religion. And when you don't even go by what's logical, becomes a religion. It becomes you just believing people because of the authoritative position that they hold, and you just indoctrinate to believe that if you don't have these credentials, then you're not, you can't be qualified to speak. And it's kind of like just holding thought hostage. I call it the thought police. Like on my page, you mentioned this. I say many things, I know, and I know I'm censored. I know I can't, they got my tongue tied and all this, but I'm showing the institutional doctrines. I'm not even speaking of my own volition. I'm just showing people their own information. So it's not any misinformation if I'm showing you NIH, the cat dog cat, and all these other institutions that people believe in. But the only difference is I'm actually critically thinking through their own so-called knowledge, because all knowledge isn't truth. Somebody can tell you a lot of knowledge. It can be 100% lies. And we all understand Agenda 2030. We understand the biometric digitization of society, the Great Reset, and all these things about, they're removing a lot of these mandates, but guess what they're not removing? The passports, the digitizing of passports and biometric information, because the fourth industrial revolution is all about transhumanism. It's about making you your own, making you the product to be bought and sold. It's controlling your body, and you basically turning over yourself to government to be able to participate in society. It's crazy, man. Crazy.
Well put there. So, Dr. Polymath, okay, so he said many things, but as part of answering some of your questions, he talked about, people's forfeiture of critical thinking, right? Handing it over to those organs of sense making, as we discussed earlier, whom have their own particular interests, and also saying that perhaps thinking and discourse is necessary, because I talked about the pushback of safety, and he's saying, hey, look, how else do we know what's true without talking about a bunch of wrong stuff and being free to say a bunch of wrong things and so on and so forth? So go ahead, Dr. Polymath.
Oh, I mean, all I can say is fractal Hegelian logic.
Is that all you're going to say?
That explains everything that I would want to say.
Well, why don't you go ahead and explain it, sir?
Right. Okay. So, fractal is, as we explained before in a previous conversation, is just a series of repeating patterns from one level to the infinite degree of another level. So a simple case is this. In your mind, you have your self-delusions. You lie to yourself. You create stories so that you can steal, lie, cheat, and still feel justified so that you can continue to live. At the family level, the same situation happens with the father, mother, etc. This happens at all levels, society up to government level, up to universal, regional, international levels. The point is, at each level, there is a logic and a way of being, games, rules, ways of engaging with matter to maintain a certain system and flow of things, each with different value systems. In the small scale, it's your family, maintaining that cohesiveness between you and the people right next to you, so you don't kill each other, that you enjoy the moment, you help each other. You may even go protect your son or daughter, I guess, as a simp, even though you know what they did wrong. They may have burnt Holly's hair, but you're going to stick with your daughter, right? That's exactly how it happens at all levels. Point here is there's nothing.
No honor killings for you. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, there now you're protecting the rest of your children from the ostracization of society. Anyways, the point is there's nothing special about government level, mind control, delusions, and all these red herrings and whatever it is, misdirections. This is exactly what happens at every single level. The point here is, and also what the brother mentioned about us losing elements of our freedom, that is all true. And the thing is, we are in a Hegelian dialective at every point in the years during the Marxist Regents Leninist time. We had the same issue. We're giving our freedom of being subservient farmers in Russia to join a collective whereby the government determines how much we make from selling and trading of our products.
Yeah, and a lot of those peasants were definitely forced. If you want to talk about the collectivization of agriculture, that was when a lot of the killing happened and the starvations and Ukraine. That was one of the first, not one of the first, but that was a major kick to Ukraine, because Ukraine, being the bread basket of Europe, somewhat very agriculturally active, anyways. So Stalin did a huge number on them. But let me ask, let me put this on the table.
So the point is, we're in Hegelian back and forth.
Okay, yeah. So I get it.
Nothing.
The thing is happening at all the levels. I get it. Now, spiritual logic. You think you were having a conversation with his name escapes me now. I don't know why, but he then mentioned something about, well, if you've tried all these different quasi solutions to whatever ails you or humanity, the solution for war, the solution for your heartache, the solution for sin, whatever it may be. Now, if you tried all these different things, maybe it's science, maybe it's this particular philosophy, maybe it's this, that, or the other, and it doesn't work, then why don't you try the spiritual solution? Who said that on your channel recently again?
Lawrence, was it Lawrence guy?
Yeah, it was Lawrence. Yeah, it was Lawrence.
Yeah, Lawrence guy.
So let me ask you to go first, and then K Polymath.
Okay.
the spiritual solution, because you, K Polymath, went spiritual with the Hegel too, because Hegel is all about spiritual dialectics, right? Now, um, what was Lawrence Guy saying? He's not here to explain himself, but what would be a quick synopsis of what is the spiritual solution? Is it the laws in the books?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
go ahead, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah. When it comes to things of spirit, we tend to think of are we getting ourselves together first? Like if you think about the biblical law, for in my example, because I'm a biblical person, a biblical law is to basically hold myself accountable that I'm not deceived, I'm not self-deceived before I can interpret anything in my life. Like if I'm deceived, or if I don't understand deception or false knowledge or lies, then I'm in a worldview that I'm not going to know the truth. For example, like I understand the nature of this world. I understand what the agendas is. I understand the frailty of people to need to fit in, to live by their vanity, by their pride, and by their sense of status in this world. And that convolutes. We know that doctors are getting bribed. We know that politicians are being lobbied. Like we know these things happen. So when we talk about what's in someone's best interest, how do we just forget that, people are being paid to produce false narratives? They're being paid to deceive you about your health. And they're promised, they're colluding with other entities for bigger agendas. Like we know this. So that's really a spiritual thing of how you identify your world. I always talk about epistemology. How do you know what you know, or how do you know what you think you know, if you yourself are self-deceived about your, your reality? Like people, it's like somebody who's in greed or lust. Like if for a man that's in greed or lust, he lacks wisdom and self-control and discipline to not be deceived by his own desires. So somebody can easily play him according to his ego, according to whatever paradigm he wants to validate his existence by. He can be deceived. And I think
Let,
that
let me I think it's a good point that you made, but I want to make sure that
okay,
I get it. In other words, I say, what is the spiritual solution? And you say,
right.
okay, what is the spirituality thing? And what
Hmm.
I hear you saying, going through my filters and everything,
Hmm.
is at the end of the day, your consciousness is responsible for identifying the world.
Yes.
Okay. And there's so many ways to go wrong in that task,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And consciousness, spirit, that's what this is about. So a wrong identification and its consequences, along
Hmm.
with also a right identification and its consequences, are all spiritual matters. Therefore,
Yeah. Where do you get your
okay,
identity
all right,
from? Yep. Yeah, exactly.
okay,
I
go
totally
ahead.
agree with you. Where do you get your identity from? Are you getting your identity from? It's all right to use the world as a tool, as a means to acquire resources and basic needs, but your identity can't come from a world that seeks to reduce you down to nothing, like data, or the world doesn't have value. That's why we reduce human life to just expendable data, where we can manipulate the masses by just fabricating false statistics. Like, it's so many things wrong, and I gotta speak carefully. That's why I'm speaking the way I am, because there's so many things wrong with this whole agenda. Like even their diagnostic procedure that they use to determine what a case is has been proving false. So if you can't even determine what a case is, then what are you really trying to protect people from other than symptoms that are being interpreted from a false narrative? Because Big Pharma is interpreting your symptoms because Big Pharma has a solution for you. Big Pharma is regulated by big government. So it's not even about, you having an honest assessment of your symptoms. It's just about you believing this thing because they want to put something in your body. And it's like, and we know about the biotech company with that starts with the P. Their documents got released, and they wanted to push this for 75 years before you actually knew the consequences of you taking this procedure. You know?
Mm, mhm, mhm. So, Dr. Polymath, okay, you see, spiritual logic here is basically said, if I hear him correctly, that um, all those things I was saying earlier about reading what the LA Unified School District said and their misappropriations, their lies, right? Jordan Peterson's, most important rule is about, telling the truth, right? And everything seems like all totalitarianism and all bad things seems to come from a lie, right? We all know how Jordan
No,
Peterson. So
telling the
wait,
truth is
hold
a
on a
bad
second.
thing.
Hold on a second. Okay. That basically all the things that I've said so far about the misappropriation of information, disinformation of that we saw in that 7-minute clip. Okay. So spiritual logic is saying that all that is a spiritual matter because they're out there messing up the fabric of reality, like Jordan Peterson was saying we can't mess with the fabric of reality and the skeptic expect to get away with it. No, I'm serious. I'm serious. Anyways, so what do you have to say about this question of what the spiritual solution is? Then you brought in Hegelian dialectics earlier. Spiritual logic has said, hey, look, from a standpoint of consciousness and identification, and the identification of reality is it's all spiritual matters. What do you have to say?
Right. So I think spiritual logic is taking on a Platonic sense of the good, orienting yourself towards God or the good. And yeah, I think that works for some people. But the reality is the world is complex. There's if you don't become the wolf yourself and remain the sheep, you will become hunted. Now, if you're okay with that, so you like the narrative or the meta story of, I guess, fighting against the world under that certain kind of, let's say, good principles, and as Jordan Peterson says, don't lie, etc. Fine. If that's the story you want to imbue yourself in, that's okay. The consequence is death, at least physical death. Now, you could also become corrupted and choose to be corrupted and also accept spiritual death at the same time, and yet have like a physical, manifest yourself physically in the best way. You corrupt yourself. Okay, so imagine space-time is bending around you. You could either choose to bend with it or stay stiff and true to yourself and then be crushed in the moment. So spirituality here, I guess it depends. Do you value a transtemporal concept of your spirit, soul, in a
Do
metaphysical
you?
sense across different dimensions, or do you value dominating this space
I
that
asked
we
you a
currently?
question. Do you?
I don't know yet. I don't know which side I want to pick.
I have a caveat. I have a caveat about what you said. See, here's the thing. Yeah, you're right. To go against the world to challenge the government is a martyr. It's like a sense, in a sense, it's martyrdom. But here's the issue: physical death might be something I have to deal with, but it's also something that people are dealing with when they follow false narratives and lies. Because a lot of people are basing their whole reality on what the government is saying. And there's a lot of adverse reactions and death that results from that. So people are still dying on both sides. Now, the question is, right for now, I have a better chance of surviving critically thinking my own health by using logical means like what I eat and controlling my environment as best I can and making the best logical choices that I understand instead of just attributing morality to a government which never had a track record of morality. I think you're more likely to die trusting your perceived enemy because governments don't really care about anything. They don't care about people. They never did. Any hierarchy, empire, uh, higher civilization never cared about people. They're about rule and conquering and control. It's never been about caring about the common man. So I think that you're most likely to die that way. I think your wits of wisdom of trying to circumnavigate all these traps that they're laying for us to deceive us into their systems. I think that is, for now, it's been working out for me.
And what do you have to say to that, Cape on Math?
Yes, at that level of abstraction, that's 100% correct. But let's say you want to become a billionaire.
Oh yeah.
Right. So yeah, 100%. If you, for example, so in a way, if you want a minimalistic, and by minimalist I don't mean necessarily poor, but I just mean if you want to have that peace of mind through enlightenment, when you've contended with your soul, you're happy and content with just being, and you have some sentimental stuff that make your spirit alive. For example, if I have my favorite food, which I'm a good chef, I've got my internet, I've got my laptop, I can think, I'm free to kind of exercise my will as much as the things which I enjoy. I'm actually comfortable the way I am right now. the question is, right, is then if you want to change, if you want to participate in, like, let's say, moving mountains, moving your people, changing the way your people's mentality operates, that's now where you do risk your life. You do risk things, or the system bending around you to try to remove you because it sees you as a cancer. It sees you as a cell that is replicating too fast and changing too many of your people. So that's when then they will remove you. The system will have to remove you because you're no longer just a small bug. You're now a corrupted file, even if the corruption in this case is corruption to truth. But yes, at the level of abstraction of as an individual living an individual life, 100% wisdom, truth. Like, for example, I don't and have never really gone to the hospital apart from an eye problem, something like that. When it comes to my health in general, cold, flus, etc., I just take natural remedies. And I've noticed that this works. Even when I was younger, I had this repeated sickness that I noticed if I don't just touch it, it will go away much sooner. If I just relax, meditate, not get stressed, I won't get sick as frequently. So I notice all these things. So when people, especially in Africa, when most people here are sort of, they believe in medicine, like pharmaceutical stuff, so much that they think whenever I complain of an ailment, they're like, you have to get it checked. And they keep just taking this over and over and over. They have fallen for it. In my sense, from my experience, when I simply listen to my body, I meditate, I take in, I try to understand where things are happening, what is happening. I believe I have a much, like you said, I have a much more healthier relationship with myself. But at the end, if I want to make true change to others, I want to, what's that word? When you make other people, like a domino effect. If you want to, do that to your own people, that's when you become a threat to the system.
Yeah. So what about Moses? In other words, right? What if you're supposed to be Moses? What if you're supposed to go there and start some spiritual magic?
You have to choose, like Jonah in the Bible. You have to choose whether you will.
He didn't want to go, man.
to listen. Right.
I feel Jonah though. I mean, I feel him. But anyways,
right.
Go ahead. You guys are having a conversation.
You make a good point, and keep in mind, I'm not saying that if you have a broken bone, you can't go to a hospital, because sadly, people have gotten away from being able to do things ourselves. Like if you go back 100 years, people knew how to mend broken bones. They knew how to prepare, heal lacerations. We've lost a lot of these common skills, and we turn our thinking of the corporations, because hospitals were originally created to be like for times of war, to take wounded soldiers, and patch them up and put them back on the battlefield. It was never meant to be a lifestyle of going to these people to interpret your entire health and being. That's some kind of new phenomenon that pharmaceutical industries and the government have colluded to bring us into a system of just lack of critical thinking and personal responsibility about what our body is, our responsibility, basically. So since we don't know how to do basic stuff, like people used to have children at home, they pass down knowledge to how to rear children and do all these things. And we gotten away from this, and just this dependence on technology, which, like I said, technology is a tool, but the government seeks to use technology to take us away from self-sufficiency and family structure without government intervention. Like, family is good, but family under government intervention is not good, because now you have the government interpreting how your family should live, and the government is the head of the household, not a competent, righteous, wise man. That is no longer the head of household. So now you have everybody going to these institutions and these corporations, which have other agendas. As we see now, like this science shit. I mean, even the word science, all the words that we use to describe things are being corrupted. That's why they say the science has changed, but it really hasn't. It just wasn't science to begin with. It was a delusion. It was an illusion to deceive people who have forgotten self-sufficiency, have forgotten how to do basic things in life, because now we've been, institutionalized, so to speak. So, I mean, it's terrible, man, because even now that they lifted the mandates, people still want to wear the mask almost as a psychological thing. It has nothing to do with protection, because if you notice, if you watch a lot of people, they choose who they want to wear a mask around or not based on their personal comfort level. If there was truly something going around that you felt like this mask would protect you from, you would not just situationally.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
yeah. It's kind of weird, yeah, because people are like, oh yeah, cool. Now I'm chilling over here with the
Right,
person who
right,
came to
right.
meet at Starbucks, and I'm just gonna remove it. I don't
Right.
care anymore about.
It's
But
crazy,
then,
man.
so I mean, in a certain kind of maybe a slightly comical way, at a particular point, I liked the mask, 'cause I was like, I put a mask, put on a hat, go to the grocery store, just no one, just be zoned out, put your headphones on, that kind of thing, right? So if
Mhm.
so I kind of, but um, good points you're making here, okay? But the thing is, and you already know this because we were talking about the spiritual aspect, okay?
Mhm.
Is you could go read Plato, you can see the same thing. In other words, like this, you did mention that the one new phenomenon is this kind of medicalization, the medical centers, the doctors, the going there, the kind of regular annual thing.
Mhm.
That whole thing is pretty new. But there was, if you read Plato's Republic, there's a general kind of people scoffing at people who go to doctors, right?
Mhm.
As like, oh, you're not a healthy guy. Why are you doing that? But also in that same book, over 2,000 years ago,
Mhm.
is the same kinds of talk about people doing the things that you're saying, which is not being healthy and not all that kind of stuff. It was all going on, right?
Yeah,
So
right, right.
obviously, right? So the thing is, you're saying this is a cyclical forever pattern at the end of the day, right? I think
Mhm.
Mr. K Polymath came in with his Hegelian fractal stuff, so that we know his answer there. But okay, so this is a perennial thing, always happening, nothing particularly new here. So
Right.
then it, that means, does not mean that, then what is the nature of the spiritual solution then? Is it, what is it supposed to save if it hasn't changed anything so far, one might say, right? Or is it all an internal thing?
Well, honestly, that's a good
Well,
question. But you want to go, or I was going to say
Uh
quickly.
yeah, for me, sorry, go ahead.
Uh, I was going to say quickly. The solution is, in the Bible says this. I know I'm probably an outlier here, being a Bible believer, but let me just say that the Bible says that we the biblical people are the salt of the earth. We preserve the quality. Like, there's no morality coming from a secular world. It's like people are just doing. That's why morality is changing. Because now it's adapting to what people want. And if people become more evil, and I'm saying evil according to a standard of how we don't want to be treated, morality is changing because people are becoming more wicked, so to speak. And so, I just think that the people who actually resist these things, we're preventing it from accelerating faster. Because if more people were along with this agenda, it would accelerate much faster. It would progress. And because people offer resistance and they challenge, there's some people who are not afraid to challenge authority, even at the risk of being blackballed, their lives. These people are actually preserving the little bit of structure that keeps us from being a complete dystopian nightmare, more than we already are, because there's still people who are willing to use their voice to speak reason and counter the narrative. And I think that from all walks of life, anybody who just wants to critically think, we are the resistance at this point. It's us against the conformity sheep hive mind of just going along with propaganda because the television told you. It's so weird to me, because even when you wear these face coverings, man, it's uncomfortable. It makes you hot. Imagine people in hot climates. How do you walk around like respirating in 90 plus
uh,
degree humidity with your face covering and not feel something's wrong with you? Like, that's crazy to me.
hmm. Yeah, uh K Polymath, you wanted to jump in earlier.
Yeah, so you mentioned about the Hegelian principle of back and forth. Or as Jordan Peterson always says, the left and the right are like the two, whatever, flaps of a plane. You need both of them to have this uh, understanding of each other, or whatever he says. The issue is, though, is that think of it like dendrite. Think of it like one reason why we grow older and we die is because our is it axioms? Forget it. My biochemistry is
Oh yeah, so
disappeared.
stop and take a deep breath and think about it while I shout out the super chat, which I think I completely ignored and forgot. Right? Gail in the building. Okay, Gail at night. Go subscribe to her, by the way, if you haven't already. She drops $2 in the bucket. Says no comment, no question, just pure love. Shout out to you, Gail. Go ahead, Dr. Polymath, with your metabolism.
Right. So one reason why we die is because our telomeres shorten each time our cells replicate. So across time, they shorten, and sooner or later we end up dying. Same thing here with this civilization and colonization of this planet and spirituality as well as control is that yes, there is a Hegelian, like a dialectic where, let's say, um, the government is always trying to increase its power and crutches over you and being more sort of big brother like and reducing control. For example, right now with the biometric systems, I actually, for my PhD, I worked with a technology that's thermoelectric. You can, basically put these chips on your hands, and you can actually use the difference between your body temperature and the environment to power them. They're self-powered devices that now are wearable through your skin. Now, the point here is we're reaching a point where, like the brother mentioned, everything is becoming sort of digitized. We're now becoming a product in on itself. You look at the concept of human resources. That's exactly what we are. Now, the issue here is it's not just like as in every generation has to fight against it and kind of find philosophical ways, spiritual ways to sort of survive this. Yes, that will help, and being kind of enlightened, being understanding and not being sort of part of the people who get corrupted and moved all around. There's a bigger issue here. Think of it like a magnet. As the magnets, let's say you're putting two opposite poles, right, north and north, or rather the same poles, north and north together. You can push it together up to a point whereby no matter how harder you push, you won't close that gap. There's an electromagnetic force that kind of creates a separation point. There's the same thing here with the progression. As the systems become more tight, we are losing ourselves and experience of human beings, freedom, to a point whereby we will no longer be humans at that point. We will be reaching a point where it's just like, as the brother said, total dystopian nightmare, to a point whereby it will destroy and kill our spirits. So the issue is, yes, we will reach that point. I don't know if it's going to explode and then we've decided to fight against our oppressors, but by that point, it's going to be so late because we're going to be stuck in a metaverse. We might actually be in another simulation whereby we won't even know that we're in a simulation. That's now where things are going to be dangerous, because right now, if you think about it, if we can't even know that this whole whatever issue was just a false flag, in the sense that, yes, I'm not going to go and explain it, but if we couldn't even see through this whole situation, how are we going to see through digital simulative situation whereby technology in the next 100 years is good enough that we can just be stuck in a simulation? We won't even be able to know that we're in one. At that point, we really are just a slave like the Matrix.
Yeah. And let me say this: I shared your screen, so it's going to be a lot of biblical people in here, because but this is a good good discussion, and I wanted this information to get out so people can hear people from different perspectives. Because also, it's like a lot of people don't realize we have much more in common on basic logic. It's just that, and we can work on that foundation as well, because just like the brother said, if you think about what the secular ideology usually comes from in origin, it talks about the Big Bang Theory or the singularity, but it's almost like that's a smoke and mirror to try to push people towards a singularity. They're trying to say, well, because they, the Big Bang Theory narrative is that they want to say everything came from when I grew up, it was nothing. Now they changed it to a singularity. But it's almost like it's a sleight of hand to show you where they want to bring humanity to. They want to bring you to this singularity where there's no independent thought. There's no we're connected through technology, and we're disconnected through our basic humanity. And that's kind of like why when you talk about the spirit from the biblical worldview, it's like when you're a slave to what the Bible calls of sin, which is just transgression of the law of God, meaning that, you know, your greed, your lust, your vanity, your pride, your ego, these are things the world weaponizes. And people will go along with lies and deceptions because of trying to get money. Like the brother said, you're not going to be a billionaire by speaking the truth. You're not going to be a billionaire if you don't engage in some corruption. You know, the world holds, you know, people hostage who, you know, well, it doesn't really hold us people hostage, but it kind of incentivizes people to be corrupt for wealth. You know, the politicians, they will say anything, you know, because they get paid a lot. They get perks, they get control, and money seems to be the driving force to get people to believe anything. Status, credentials, and privilege. They're turning this into a privilege thing. Now people are saying, look, I can travel to different places and you can't because I'm willing to do things that you're not. Like I have never taken a diagnostic procedure for this fake pathogen. I have never, y'all know already, I'm never putting nothing in my veins. I don't even want to go and get blood drawn at this point because I don't even know how corrupt these so-called hospitals are now. They're incentivizing people to label them as certain DVOC 19 patients, and they're incentivized to put people on respirators because the hospitals are businesses. So now it's so many things that are compromising even basic health at this point. And so I just want to avoid it. But there are certain times where you can't, like if you just get in a car accident and you need to be patched up. Unfortunately, we don't have a family structure with skilled family members who can kind of put you back together. So, you know, technology is still a tool that is helpful in certain situations where, you know, you need quick treatments and stuff. But at the same time, like the sister Jules, I believe she said, you know, from the biblical perspective, outside, you know, we put our faith in the way we were designed to be biblically, that we have a mind and we have acknowledgement of the law of our creator that holds us accountable and kind of protects us to discern from being in these agendas. Yeah, my life might be more minimalistic because I refuse to bow down. But at the same time, I look at this world in the realm of eternity. I could die tomorrow. You know, I want to be sure that I'm living my life for the actual purpose and not this illusion, you know, or this matrix or this metaverse type reality that they want to get people to live for. Because, yeah, that might be cool until you die. And then you realize that what purpose you live for. And some people don't believe that nothing happens after death. And I strongly just believe that something is, because our bodies are physical, but the part that animates our body clearly is of consciousness or spirit, as it were. And that is eternal. That does, you know, even science, you know, and I don't use the term energy. I'm just making a parallel that energy can either be created or destroyed, but also the spirit is likewise. It's eternal. It goes somewhere. And so I just, you know, I just want to drop little nuggets to make people question this world and what its true intentions are, because it's not anything good coming from it. You know, technology could be, we have all the technology right now. We could make clean water. We could clean up the environment. We could have more cars that work in tandem with the environment. But that technology is not being promoted for the same reason cures are not being promoted. You know, sick people are profitable and easy to control. Healthy people are more self-sufficient. And likewise, if we had technology where we have more solar power, more any kind of technology that doesn't use stuff that destroys the environment, then we wouldn't need so much government intervention. Like the brother said, it is the Hegelian dialectic: problem, reaction, solution. They create a problem, they wait for the fear-based irrational reaction, and then they give you a false solution to only takes away your rights and freedoms and turns over your body to government.
Mm-hmm. Dr. K. Polymath, when you were talking about what if you are going again, when I said, okay, what if you're Moses, okay? And there is this fight question. You said push the people into get a domino action going. And in doing that, it's the same question of wanting to be a billionaire, by the way. I put those in the same category almost. You know, because Moses struck the rock, right? Moses was out there wilding, as they said. uh, but what exactly do you mean by that, K Polymath? all this fighting that you allude to? Or are you there? Seems quiet over there.
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, it's 6 a.m. That's not relevant. So, to answer your question,
So you're half asleep, is what you mean?
oh well, yeah. So to answer that question, I'll try to answer that question. It basically means you can't come for me for my question, my answer not being good, basically. But anyways, I think the issue here is, let's say if you're trying to be a billionaire or you're trying to kind of create like this domino effect, you're now dealing with, well, first of all, you're escaping the agent, the Agent Smith in the Matrix. What you're trying to do now is you're trying to integrate and work within the system, yet avoiding these system administrators who are trying to prevent you from moving effectively around the system. You're trying to wake people up in the system while avoiding Agent Smith, and then also telling them to avoid Agent Smith. So that's a very difficult thing. At some point, you're going to have to interact with the system in such a way that you either pretend you're part of the system, and then you trick the system to a certain degree that you're actually one of the administrators, that you're actually trying to administer whatever rules that they're trying to do, and then you obviously pull a Trojan horse on them. In other words, let's say you're trying to save people, you might have to become a dictator within the system, then break the system from within. That's an example of the domino thing. Obviously, to be a billionaire, similar things too. You could go down the usual route of being a billionaire, and then you could turn around like Elon Musk and do whatever it is. Again, I'm creating a narrative of Elon Musk not being part of this system. Whether it's true is irrelevant for this reason why I bring him up. So yeah, there's several ways you could either become. It's interestingly, it's almost like you become, as we mentioned yesterday, the Batman that Gotham needs in order to free Gotham. And you may end up in a situation whereby you end up being corrupted to a point. Let's say if you become a dictator, you may have to end up killing people in this example, good, innocent people, in order to save everyone else. The only issue is, will you become corrupted in that situation? Sure, you may even lose your soul. You might even end up in hell for doing all this. But could you sacrifice yourself and your spiritual eternity to save or free the planet? And that's now where
is that even let me ask. I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here, but spiritual logic, is that even allowed? Could you possibly do some sacrifice your eternal soul
No,
for the
no.
salvation of
Oh no.
like Judas was kind of doing everybody a favor.
Here's the thing.
Anyway.
Here's the thing. It's not even about saving the world or people who want the world. There are people who are on the fence. There are people who have not completely turned over to one side or the other, and it's almost about just giving people a clear alternative that the world won't offer. The world only wants you to understand knowledge through their lens. It only wants you to understand origin, meaning, purpose, and destiny from its lens. And people have never even considered an identity that this creation has a creator, and it wasn't a cosmic quantum accident. And it just offers people a view that they won't hear in the world. Because some people, this world feels very empty, it feels very dry. The meaning and purpose, money is great and everything, but I mean, if you look at the rate of suicide among people, it's often the wealthy. It's not the dirt poor that are killing themselves. It's like once you get everything you thought you needed in this world, it's very empty and very alone. And so people are still seeking higher meaning and purpose. And I just offer a biblical worldview to those who may want to consider that. It's not about saving the world, because everybody doesn't. Some people like what the world offers, and they, for whatever reason, that's their prerogative. Even the Bible said that the biblical Christ didn't pray for the world, but he prays for those his Father has given them in the world. That's John 17. So it is very some people just already have something in them that knows that this isn't quite right, but the world doesn't give them the infrastructure and platform to do that. And I'm not even trying to become the enemy where I have to, like become like Harriet Tubman or something. You turn back, I'm out to shoot you. It's nothing like that, honestly. Honestly, if you look at it, I'm using my page outside of the biblical truth that I speak from. I actually give people an objective view of the world's own information that the media won't give you. I just represent their information objectively. I critically think through what they're really saying. And if you notice that they actually expose themselves, evil is actually exposing itself through its inconsistencies, its contradictions, its ever-changing, evolving narrative that just leads to dystopian like rules and stuff. And now people are starting to say, hey, you told us this, that we'll go back to normal, and all we do is have less rights, rapid inflation, and more propaganda. And people are starting to wake up and question what the world is telling them because they look at the outcome and the results, and it's not proving to be anything good. People are still falling ill from things, and I'm not saying that exists, but people don't want to look at the fifth generation, what they're spraying in the air. They want to look at technology's effects. They want to look at the food being compromised, the water being compromised. There's so many things that the world won't tell you that are objective if you just open your eyes, and you can see that pharmaceuticals are the third leading cause of death under heart disease and cancer. And we understand that cancer and heart disease are also caused by toxins and chemicals that the government and FDA allows. So actually, it's more likely the world is the number one cause of death. And even by their own admission, medical error is the number 3 cause of death. So it proves itself.
Yeah, I mean, the idea, at least on some level, should be simple, right? On the health front, right? Just for basic, good hygiene information for the people, right? Is your health is a chronic situation, right? It's about your living, and it's long term. It's not health is not a broken bone, which you were saying that the techniques of modern day medical sciences are great for, right? It's
Right.
like engineering, right?
Yep.
It's like if you need to get this thing nicely sutured up and lasered back together and put a pole in there and screw the titanium, yeah, sure. Rock on, right?
Right.
But health is a chronic situation, meaning your hydration now, yesterday, and for the rest of your life. The amount of sunlight you get and vitamin D, what you eat, right? The freshness of it, and there all that kind of stuff. That is your freaking health. Okay.
That's not being promoted.
Because all the problems that then end up in the medical situation, which are lack of taking care of your chronic health, which leads to chronic problems. You have chronic stress, chronic dehydration, chronic XY. You know it, right? So this low level, just for purposes of definition here, chronic meaning you have just a slightly elevated level, not a spike, but a slightly elevated level of something. If it's a chronically bad thing, for example, okay, meaning if you have a chronic health problem or something that it results from something that's chronic, it's slightly elevated levels for a long period of time. An acute situation is short period of time, but a big spike, something like that. Okay. So
right.
If you don't, because of all these things that you're doing, these little things that you do every day, right? And the things that you call sauces that you put on your food, which seem like they came out of the end of a pipe in some freaking
I'm telling you, man,
factory in Jersey, right? And it's like, what is that? And then you're surprised that, oh, by the time you're like 45, you start breaking down and there's all kinds of things, and then you get in line for the next round of and you're like, for me, that part is you don't have to be a genius to understand it. Look, this medical stuff is great, okay, but it's for like you got stabbed, your legs got chopped off,
emergency situation,
stuff happened, you get shot. It's like it's techniques. It's literally engineering techniques with science and lasers and this and that, right?
But
that's what it's there for. That's not. It's not to live your life. Anyways, go ahead.
But this is where you show the poisoning of the mind. And if you I equate mind to spirit. The poisoning of the mind is where people ignore their own choices, like eating chips all day, high sugar diet, high refined sugar diets, unhealthy sedentary lifestyles. They ignore all of this objective reality, And then and try to feel pride and try to justify that. They just say, well, I can just take a pill for that, even though the pill is creating more illness. It's amplifying the problem. And then you have a better treatment, and then big pharma is profiting. Big government is controlling you through big pharma. And this is how we get to the system where Operation Warp Speed comes into play, or we got these mandates coming down controlling your employment and all this stuff, or you have to walk around people. Like, I mean, just look at the State of the Union. Nobody had a mask on in that whole State of the Union, and yet they're still talking about people need to put it on, and they're trying to use the children as a test, because that's going to pull on the heartstrings. You go in the school system, because they won't say that the mask could be making the children sick. They won't say that. These kids are not respirating properly. They're snotty, and that stuff is going to stay around their mouth and their nose. Kids are very dirty, and just to have something constantly on their mouth is just foolish, and their nose is foolish. And then these kids start getting, like, bacteria starts going back in their bodies, and then they start manifesting symptoms. Then they can say, see, we need to pull back. We need to reinstitute face coverings. We need to redo this and redo that, because they're pulling on the heartstrings using the children. And that's why they still keeping the children in this, because the children are a tool to weaponize against people.
Yeah, you had mentioned you talk about like the biblical people. The biblical people are no strangers on this channel, or they shouldn't feel like strangers here. And also specifically too, one thing I like to always remind people that the spiritual term, insofar as you can define it, is consciousness, is mind, right? And it's not like even far-fetched, because I believe there's a Germanic word, Germanic root that uses spirit and mind and such. But one thing to mention, and it seems like K Polymath unmuted himself. Maybe he wants to say something. One thing to mention, again, just for a basic jarring of people, is we have a prejudice towards matter, and it's not crazy, right? Because hey, I can touch it, I can weigh it, I can smell it, right? I can measure it, I can know if it's BS, right? It's either here or it's not. It's either gold or it's fake, right? That kind of a thing. So this other thing, or this it's not another thing, but this other aspect of being, which is consciousness, right? We tend to not be very comfortable with it. Okay. By we, I mean modern day kind of scientific enlightenment type, whatever, the way in which we've all been this kind of particular way in which we've been trained, right, is to trust in the matter, because I can measure it, I can take these gallons of it, put it in a rocket, shoot it to the moon, right? Okay. But this other thing called consciousness, I'm going to try to explain consciousness through this thing that I can measure. Okay. So I got matter and I got consciousness, right? One, I'm comfortable. For some reason, I created a separation, by the way, because I agree with you. Okay. My fundamental thing is this: there really is no separation, right? But the fact that there seems to be a separation, which is a problem to begin with, is something we must admit. And the nature in which that rift tends to happen is that people are they're holding on to matter, right? And they're uncomfortable with this other thing, and then they try to explain the other thing through matter, such as, well, consciousness is just a particular arrangement of matter. Consciousness is just a particular kind of we'll figure it out. We can program it in a whatever, like it'll come up. It's an epiphenomenon. It's an emergent thing, right? That kind of thing. But look, the point of you being prejudiced and holding on to matter as the primary place to start from is equally as valid for you to take consciousness as a place to start from and explain matter through consciousness, right? There is no privileged starting point, but we just have a materialist preference, right? But anyways, Dr. Polymath, what were you going to say?
Do you believe in God?
You're not going to take me to this. Look, okay, let me put it this way, okay? I'm going to plead a Jordan Peterson on that, okay? I'm glad Jordan Peterson came recently to kind of show us that there is an answer to that question. In other words, if you are asking me, because, okay, so I know you, Dr. Polymath. If you ask me, do I believe in God? I'll say yes. If other people ask me if I believe in God, I'll have to take a Jordan Peterson, meaning I don't know what they mean by God, right? And spiritual logic, is that fair?
Yeah.
Or me and Jordan Peterson, we've been like snakes, right? Because me is
Hey,
look, if I don't know what you're saying, I'm not gonna just play that game of God with you. You know
well,
what
no,
you go
I
ahead.
do. No, listen. Well, everybody know me. Y'all know I'm a biblical Bible believer. I separate myself from the propaganda of the unbiblical church system. That I want to separate myself from that because the Bible is not a religion. It's a book of law and commandments that is kind of etched in our minds and our conscience. It reflects what we live and the morality and virtue that we attribute ourselves. That doesn't come from materialist only. There are a lot of immaterial things that come from the Bible that, a lot of immaterial ideologies that the purely materialistic worldview can account for. And even mind itself, I always say that we are the greatest evidence of a creator, our mind, our being, how we live, the expectation we draw, the fact that we complain. Chemical reactions don't do these things. And there's a lot of things that I talk about, and y'all can check me out. But as far as Jordan Peterson, I mean, you're being honest, and I think that you being honest is more important because you're still evolving on a lot of things, just like everybody is. And I don't mean evolution in no crazy term, just meaning thought process. So for me, I'm very concrete about my faith and my belief in the biblical creator defined in Christ and who he represents. And I get that. A lot of people are not going to be there. But I think that it's better for you to be what you say you are than to be people who, and I'm call out the people who represent themselves as Christians, who actually claim to be a Christian, but in fact, they really do not, and will prove that they weren't a Christian, because there are a lot of the Bible speaks of a lot of false prophets and false converts and false, people who claim to be something, but the hypocrisy and the way they live, and even the lack of repentance or honesty about their actions. Like, I can call out myself when I'm wrong. I can admit that I'm struggling in certain things. I'm not, promoting myself as self-righteous or above things. I'm just saying that I'm holding myself to a standard where I see my need to be need of salvation, my need of regeneration, of taking my mind outside of my flesh and putting it on biblical truth, which has produced fruit in my life. It's changed a lot of things about how I perceive reality and how I identify my own actions and choices. But that's me. And I think that everybody has to represent themselves. Even the Bible says everyone should work out their own salvation with fear and trembling. So there's a sense of humility about people speaking, in a certain reverence to, the great unknown. And for me, it's God biblically, and I've talked about this a lot on my page. For those, you can check out my page, and I'm very forthcoming about why I believe what I believe, and a lot of things that have brought me to the biblical worldview outside of every other worldview. A lot of my channels a lot of my streams I have to put on Odyssey or Rumble because the thought police doesn't like me very much. And that goes against what we were talking about today about information and why is it censored? If this is about coming to truth, and I hate that the world uses that word, but if it was, then why do they run from alternative thoughts and challenging the narrative? I mean, that's what a hypothesis does. A hypothesis is meant to be tested, but there's no scientific method in any of this. There's nothing. It's honestly, this is the same propaganda of a lot of so-called religions. This scientism is no different. The preachers of scientism are simply researchers and experts. And I'm not saying that all these so-called people, they're not skilled people who have a knowledge base in their craft. I'm just saying when it comes to your health and government, that there's no reason to attribute morality to these people, and no reason at all. We know that they're bought out, they're sold out, they're in it for themselves, power, collusion, all these things. We know this. So just be careful about attributing attributing a certain amount of honesty to certain institutions. Like there's no justice in the justice system. We understand that justice is more controlled by lobbying and money and self-interest than it is actual justice to an objective higher standard.
Go ahead, K. Polly Matthew.
Yeah. I mean,
You
this
just
is
you-
ironic. I mean, Los Angeles Unified continue to take a science-based approach on
I mean,
that
okay,
thing. Oh my
cool. You didn't.
God.
Yeah. Because this is where we started. Okay, so
Oh
ladies and
my
gentlemen,
God.
basically, Los Angeles Unified School District is the second largest school district in the United States, still keeping the mask mandate. And we watched something. It was an impromptu thing. I hadn't watched it before the stream, and we saw a lot of. I don't know if you saw it. Let me play the first few seconds for you, Spiritual
Okay.
Logic.
Sure.
It's just a simple report. Okay, they're just basically trying to tell us. Okay, and it's gonna play this ad. So let me just do this. They're basically trying to tell us that Los Angeles decided not to stop or they still continue with the mandate, right? But the way they framed it, the first few seconds, which you'll see how they start and everything, was so ridiculous. And then you go down and you start reading what Los Angeles said, and that's what Dr. K was reading about. Like they just said a bunch of nonsense about, well, we're taking a science-based approach, the science that led to the on-ramping of the particular protection protocols. It's just talking like that, that kind of BS. Anyways, let's see. It'll be now. Turn this on. Okay, cool. Oh, what?
Yeah, I can't hear it for some reason.
To the torpedo. The biggest challenge would be determining how much weight.
Okay, I think it went past it.
Yeah.
So it's this one.
Okay.
And it'll probably play another
ad.
Freaking ad, but it's pretty interesting. Get the ad going. Still on here, but that's because I canceled the sound.
Yeah.
Progressive. You need insurance? you need insurance?
I'm good.
All right. You can be a healthy runner type if you get Progressive.
They just put all kinds of crazy things together, man. I'm telling you, it's a lot of subliminal stuff going on here.
Okay. So, sorry.
Declaring COVID-19.
So let's start this, okay?
Okay.
Organization made a landmark announcement declaring COVID-19 a worldwide pandemic. Schools and businesses were shut down. Hospital beds in California and across the nation.
So this is just a report about, you see what's here? Los Angeles mask, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like we know why we wear masks, right? We know about COVID and everything. So just to tell me about masks, you see what they're doing in the beginning of this thing?
They're making you fear-mongering you with their agenda, their narrative.
It's
just so kind of silly. Okay, let's
exactly 2 years ago, the World Health Organization made a landmark announcement declaring COVID-19 a worldwide pandemic. Schools and businesses were shut down. Hospital beds in California and across the nation quickly filling up with patients. The virus killing millions.
Millions. Women and children most affected.
They won't tell you about
just an exceptional period. We had converted nearly every usable space. We really had no idea what we were dealing with. We had no protection.
Now that the rate of hospitalizations and virus transmission has dropped significantly, the state of California has decided to lift its indoor mask mandate for schools, but districts can make their own decisions. Parents of students in the LA Unified District are wondering when their kids will be allowed to take the facial coverings off.
I think it's time. If it's time for us adults to take them off, I think it's time for the children to take them off.
Online learning was a nightmare, and we're very glad to be back, at least with outdoor unmasking now, but we can't wait till everybody's unmasked if they're okay with that.
Notice how he had to say, if they're okay with it. Like,
can I say something?
Go ahead.
It's amazing to me that now parents used to be controlling about what happens with their children, and now parents are not even controlling what happens with them. They're like, well, I can't wait until we're allowed to breathe again. we're allowed to walk around showing our face. Like, what happened to people? Where we just have to wait for orders on high to think, to move, to breathe. It's like we don't. It's like there's zero critical thinking allowable in society anymore, according to these people.
Indeed.
Nightmare.
Indeed.
And we're very glad to be back, at least with outdoor unmasking now. But we can't wait till everybody's unmasked if they're okay with that.
Tonight, LAUSD officials issued a statement saying they're
You see the statement, right? You see that statement here, which it's below. We're going to look at it later, but this statement is pure BS. We'll get so far, and this is the point. Is this is not some kind of fancy big production, right? This is just their basic. Oh, we're just going to tell you about LA Unified, right? And even that is filled. Even this is filled with such BS. So anyways,
working with labor partners, including the teachers union, to transition from requiring indoor masking to strongly recommending it. That means when kids go back to classrooms in Los Angeles on Monday, they will have to keep their masks on. Some parents say they aren't ready for a change in the rules.
I think it should be anyone's choice. I'm not against it or for it.
She's not against it or for it, spiritual.
What does that even mean?
So this is another part of the BS. So first of all, they put that BS beginning of like, oh, remember what this is a serious business, millions died, blah blah blah, right? Like we don't know what mask is. Like we haven't lived through the past 2 years, right? Like they had to remind us what's going on, right? Like you're
programming fresh.
Spiritual. You've been spiritual, you've been sleeping, okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Now they're now showing us, okay, oh, some other people think it's like when you break, it's almost like you need surgery. Okay, we're talking about medical stuff. You just got stabbed. You're gonna take a poll, ask the lady on the street whether you should keep the left kidney or they should do operation on this side. Is that what you're gonna do? Then what does it matter? Because this is supposedly a medical situation, right? So then what does it matter what the third lady that dropped her kid off at the school thinks?
Right.
But anyways, let's see. It's quite funny.
Keep their masks on. Some parents say they aren't ready for a change in the rules.
I think it should be anyone's choice. I'm not against it or for it.
Oh, I want them to keep it on. I do.
Wow.
Personally.
She's gonna tell us why. Okay, what?
I was waiting for that.
It's the money shot. She's gonna break it down to you. Okay. Let's see.
Personally. Yeah, tell me why. Because it's still out there, the virus, just to be safe.
Because it's still out there, spiritual.
According to who? That's what I'm saying.
What does that even really mean? All kinds of stuff is out there.
It's still out there. Total programming from the television.
It's still out there
because the president, Fauci, and all the elite got out there and said it's out there. It's still out there. Because why? The cases and numbers are going up. What cases and numbers? The cases that the cat dog cat said. The cases coming from all these institutions that we will never be able to verify. And so remember it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve, till lockdown, till you can't walk out without doing this. You can't travel. You can't do all this. And now you took all these inoculations. You're still, according to them, you're still in trouble. You're still going to get it, and there's nothing they can do about it. And it's like people still say it's out there. There's still no defined it. There's never any defined it.
Let's hear her reason again.
I'm not against it or for it.
Oh, I want them to keep it on. I do. Why? Personally. Yeah, tell me why. Why? Because it's still out there, the virus, just to be safe.
It's still out there. The virus is still out there. The virus.
You know what's interesting is that
2 years ago, the world.
Yeah, what's interesting is that there's been a normalcy of a sickened population before 2019. Like people were already normalizing sickness, with their lifestyle, their lack of eating habits. So there was already a plethora of illnesses being labeled through institutions, labeling out symptoms through institutions where, even like we take a term like diabetes which is basically eating all the wrong food and acting like you don't have no self-control. But they call it diabetes because they want to promote insulin. They want to promote treatments, dialysis, all these treatments that are not cures that will actually accelerate the dying process. You know, they want to do that because people. This is what I mean when I say spiritual issues. When you can't control your eating habits, that's spiritual because you don't even know you removed yourself from the purpose that eating was designed for. Eating was designed.
Let me say something here real quick.
Okay.
So I like what you just said there. Okay. And I think that sometimes it misses the people because I mean, I think I've been attempting to do that several times now where I try to be like, hey, you know, let's just get some basic type nuggets that someone can hold on to.
Right.
Because one thing that misses people about what you said, that whole thing about, let's say, diabetes, for example, and let's say your metabolism or whatever it may be, let's say when insulin gets released or not, right? And the fact that it has a lot to do with your habits, with how you're eating, right? Okay. And the fact that those things then become a system, they grow legs of their own. It becomes a system. It becomes a disease, quote unquote, right? But it's not like some kind of thing that came from outer space. The diseases you're doing, or it's your karma, as some, you know, right? it is that activity. Okay. Then the little things that they give you, which is to treat the symptoms and to, like, yeah, of course it'll work if I throw a little bit of water here to cool off, you know, that overheating, you know, steam pipe over there, and I patch this up with a little gum every week, but come back every week, let me replace the little thing I patched up with. Of course you'll feel better, but the point is your health, again, to that whole chronic thing, is the fact that you're not freaking paying attention to your body when it tells you, hey, you know, shouldn't be having that pie anymore, or hey, you do notice how we feel better when you eat this thing than when you feel that thing. Okay, you need to be following the simple dictates there. And then when you say the spiritual matter, which is like, you know, look, it's even there spelled out for you. Like, you know, because looking at the 7 deadly sins, there's one way in which you could kind of summarize it. It's most of the time, with the exception of a couple of them, it is a prioritization of lower things in the expense of higher things. In other words, gluttony, let me put it this way, it's not a sin to have a stomach, right?
Right.
But gluttony is when you put the stomach above things that it shouldn't be above, right?
Yeah.
And that becomes and it's not a sin to have a penis, right? It's great to have a penis, okay? But in other words, but lust becomes when you take the penis and you put it above other things. So there's a simple kind of a mechanism there that I think, you know, both on this side of stuff is like, you know, the disease is you're doing, it's your action. The same thing with this mechanism of sin, if you will, certain kinds of sin, anyways. That it is just this simple shit that, you know. And anyways, I'm sorry, you were going on, but I just wanted to point that out.
No. It's kind of like that. Like a lot of people are compensating their emptiness with food. You know, they have a spiritual like emptiness inside of lacking meaning, purpose, or they have an unresolved hurt, and they're like using food or lust or material things to compensate something that has everything to do with their identity or meaning and purpose on a deeper level, like you said. And you can't replace these frivolous things. You cannot compensate meaning and purpose on a higher level of existence with frivolous things like food and sex without reaping consequences for your actions. You know, and it's like, that's what I mean when it's when I think about spirit, I think about law. I think about the creator has governed creation according to his law, and he's governed our minds according to his commandments. So basically, how we should treat each other, like the reason that nobody wants to die is because there's inherent value to life that was given to us, or the reason that nobody wants to be stolen from because there's an inherent amount of respect of things that belong to us. And it's like, if we were just chemicals predetermined and reacting, you wouldn't even have a mind to reason those things.
Okay,
So,
you're on a roll. You're on a good one there. But you just said something that I like to always try to bump against.
Okay.
It's the if we were just chemicals thing.
Mhm.
I think that there's a whole trick, okay? That it's a materialist trick, okay?
Mhm.
It involves doing a couple of things. One thing that it involves is putting just or only in front of a word. Like if I say it's just this, so it's only that, right? I've done something there. Right? There's a rhetorical move I've done. I've done a little trick, right? So there is a idea that people will say, well, there's no big deal to stuff. We're only chemicals, right? And for me, again, I go back to that whole thing of you got matter and you got spirit. They're not separate, but we're confused like that we have this mind matter duality that we got to deal with. Okay,
right.
Now you see that thing, okay. I don't know if you may see where I'm going with this here.
Kind of like the holographic universe kind of novel, where like reality is interpreted by perception or something like that, or something.
Oh no, it's okay. So, well, you going with where you were going, okay? I'll bring it back. I'm sorry, unless you lost your track because
No. What I was saying is that like when I said the chemicals, like being predetermined.
If we were just chemicals,
Yeah. Like when you put something together, it's reacting outside of like anything that you're doing, and that's not what we realize. We realize that we are not just we have a consciousness to make choices and to we have.
Let me ask you this: what if we were just chemicals?
I don't think we'll be aware of it.
So let me. I like that. Where I brought to this point because this is how I'm another way going to say the same thing I was trying to say before.
Right.
Which is basically that this whole chemical game is a trick. There is no just anything.
Right.
It's a whole trick. It's like, so how would I know if I was special? Spiritual logic. It's like saying, oh, I'm gonna look at you. I'm gonna just kind of then start giving what you are names, what you're made of names, right? Carbon, let's say, and then I'm gonna say you're only carbon, and then you're gonna feel small. You see the trick I just played on you?
Yeah. I see it.
It's all bullshit. It's like, what do you mean if I'm only chemicals? Like, what are chemicals?
Right.
You don't know what chemicals are.
Epistemology kind of thing. How do you know? Who determined what something is,
chemicals are creation in and of itself.
Yeah.
It is the whole kicking, it is the whole universe, it is the whole mystery, the whole wonder. You can't just say it's just, but it's a rhetorical trick, and it gets people in that thing of saying, oh, I'm not just chemicals, I'm more. And it's like they got you dancing. You don't play that stupid game with them. Don't be like, oh,
but you know how they got us? They started with the origin story. See, if you have to, the origin has everything to do with everything else. If you tell people that they come from stuff, because they do this in so-called scientism, they tell people that you're just stardust or you're a singularity or something like that. So you build your whole worldview based on you being a singularity or stardust that they define. They define that. Now, when I say creation comes from a creator and life comes from life and mind comes from mind, that gives us an intimate relationship with the one who made us, because mind has to come from mind. There's no, from as far as we can understand, and this is very limited, of course, there's no way that consciousness can come from just what we call just pure materialism. We don't have any example that we can see that happening, or just anything being spontaneously created, or even science can account for where life exactly came from. They kind of skip over that part. They go right until primordial ooze or ether, but they don't really define what that is. They just, that's basically their way of saying just chemicals. The primordial ooze just came together.
Yeah. So and here's the thing, because there's science, right? Which is just something that people do, right? By if a baby is doing science, because it's just you move around the world, you bump up against stuff, you're like, okay, that's a wall, this is a floor, this is this, as you said, hypothesis testing to get to conclusion and such, right? With results. There's science and then the scientism, right? But one of the issues is science sometimes gets bashed as though it was scientism, right? Science is just the thing which you just said, right? Which is just that thing which we do, right? But scientism is the whole then saying, oh, you are just this.
Yeah.
Because because the whole question about, for example, let me get back to, he's not here anymore, but he has the God thing. And here's why I don't like to answer that question. Okay? Two reasons. Number one, I'm not a you might even call me an antisocial guy in certain ways, but I'm being blatant or stark in order to make a point, right?
Right.
And I think that do you believe in God thing is a social thing. It's like a hang. It's like, are you part of some club thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really like to play that game just to begin with, right?
Right.
I don't. And for me, this God question, which is a deep epistemological or ontological, metaphysical, whatever question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a particular thing that I like to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to play that. It's not a social game for me, right?
Right.
I don't want to be like passing the card around, like, oh, you in the club? Oh, you in the club? I'm like, no. And that's why I answered him. I was like, look, okay, because I know you, and we've talked about what you mean when you ask me what God is, and I'll tell you I believe in God. But otherwise, so the first one is the social reason, and then number two is I think that the God question is also another okie doke. Let me put it this way. The God question is like that chemicals question. It's like you and I, boom, we appear here. We're here. We're actually here right now, right?
Right.
You're there, breathing, we're communicating. We exist, and there's nothing that says that existence should exist. There is nothing that you can tell me that says that any of this should be, right?
Right.
But it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is no need to go beyond that point. The minute you start asking, but who or what made, and you start arguing about what, you already missed the plot. Now, I'm not, but what I'm saying, this is more of from a subjective point of view of how, it's a kind of a spiritual practice, what I'm saying right now, right? You get what I'm saying? I'm not it's not descriptive, but I'm saying that to get into, the place you should stop is just pure awe and reverence at existence itself.
Mm-hmm.
When you get off of existence, and then you start looking for miracles or sources and stuff, it's like existence is in and of itself the biggest, purest miracle, and the question and the answer to everything of which nothing can be said, because once you start saying anything about it, you've already missed it. It's no longer it. You've created a separation, right? Same thing with God, right? So that's why I think that the God thing is okie doke, just like the chemical thing. It's like you start getting into word games. When I'm just like, bro, we are actually here.
You want to know something crazy? And this is a Bible verse, Romans 1:20. It says, "For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." Even the Bible talks about the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. And this is why the Bible just rings to me, because that's kind of what we kind of do. It's like we're going by the things that are already made, and it's like that's kind of how we're designed to function anyway. When you look at a sunrise or you look at the sky or the ocean, you have a natural reaction to what is already there. And I agree with you. It's like, wow. I don't think, like, when I look at it, I'm not like, I'm just looking at that and like, wow, that's huge. It's beyond comprehension. And it's almost like when I look at us and how as we are living beings, that is a miracle. A living being that has sovereignty to think and make choices. Like, do we even give ourselves enough credit for what we already are? Like the human body itself, that it's so many things. Science tries to minimize that. They got us all figured out, but we're far from understanding. They even admit they really don't know anything about the brain. They kind of say things about it. They manipulate it. They chemically manipulate it, but they don't really know anything about the brain. They don't really know anything. Even when they say cancer, they don't even know what that is. They say cells that metastasize or grow uncontrollably, but they can't tell you exactly the mechanism behind it. They say some say it's hormones, some say it's fungus, some say it's a so-called virus, and that's undefined word in itself, because they even say that's a non-living entity. And I can go into germ theory all day. Germ theory is its own mystery of just how we interpreting things that happen in our body. Because I tell people, if you want to look at bacteria is not the enemy. Bacteria's natural function is to break down dead and dying things, Like you see it in fungus, mildew, and mold. Anything that's rotting, it has those attributes. Now the question is, when bacteria breaks down dead things, it produces toxic byproducts, waste products. Those waste products are what cause the body problems. Just like when you drink alcohol, the alcohol it destroys the body, and the body tries to break down the alcohol into something called acetaldehyde or something like that. That's the toxic part of alcohol. Not just actually the alcohol, is how the body metabolizes it, and then it has to remove that and break it down into something the body can deal with. So, but you don't hear that being talked about in like so-called medical industry. They never talk.
Well, let me ask you this, spiritual, because this is I call it the they should teach it in school issue, which I'm against. Let me put it this way. And again, you may have caught that I like to say kind of extreme things to make a point. But the reason I don't like they should teach it, and you don't hear this, you don't hear that, is it doesn't matter. I think I was saying it earlier in this conversation with somebody else. I said, look, you can go to Spiritual Logic's channel, right? I said that, and you can find what you want to find. Also, when it comes to whatever it may be, right? There's the surface level BS, such as what we just watched, okay, and such as what is on the screen right now, okay. Let me put this thing here, because we said we were going to read this, okay. So Los Angeles Unified, Los Angeles Unified, which is the school district, right, needs to acknowledge when we are with health conditions in our district, where we are with health conditions out in our districts and communities. What does that mean, right? Nothing yet, right? The science that informed the on-ramp to the protective protocols currently in place, which have ensured the well-being of our students, right? Just BS still, right?
Yeah, totally.
The science, the on-ramping and the protocols and enjoy the well-being of our students and our workforce must too inform the off-ramp, right? We got to figure out, the science. We're waiting for the science to tell us how to take the masks off, okay? We're working on it. That's literally what that BS just said. And then Los Angeles Unified continues to take the science-based, okay? They got to remind you again, okay, what this is. That scientism that I mentioned earlier, right? It's like this scientism religion, okay? A science-based approach to COVID-19 policy, and currently working with labor partners and stakeholders to what are you working on? Anyways, so the idea is this BS is out there, but the information is also out there. Two reasons why I don't, why I'm just kind of like, dude, if you're not getting there somehow, if you're not struggling to get, if you're not, because we're all a work in progress, as you said earlier, evolving, right?
Right.
But if you're not in the upward trajectory of going deeper, whatever, then dude, like, I don't know I can't save them, right?
Yeah. I mean, see, replace the word.
Even if you put all this stuff in school, is what I'm saying. They won't know what you're talking about. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, replace the word science with government. You're waiting for the government to tell you how to think. You're waiting for the government to tell you when you can take it off. You're waiting. See, that's all it is. It's a clever deflection from government. They cloak the government in the word science, but they actually never show you any science. They just use buzzwords. It's like the Pavlov experiment. When people hear cases, death, pandemic, blah blah blah, they salivate. I always say that they start drooling, like, oh, I'm supposed to be afraid now. I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to do that. Like, it's out there, because what's out there? Whatever they said, because it basically it's the government telling you your reality, interpreting your entire existence and reality.
That woman was a perfect example of the product, right? That's the product of the machine, and she was like, because it's out there, like, and she doesn't know what she means, because it's not like she could tell you that. It's not like she's some crazy kind of fake conspiracy theorist that thinks that maybe, oh no, like, I have this paper that says 50 cc's has been pumped into the whatever. Like, no, she's just saying it's out there because I'm scared, and just to be safe.
Let me tell you
that's
something.
what they say. Hey, go ahead.
I've asked people, explain how the diagnostic tool PCR works. None of them can tell me how it even works to determine what a case is. They can't tell me anything about what they're identifying anything on. It's just that the television has told them, and they're going by their own personal experiences. And I say, here's the problem with saying, well, I got sick, I know it's real. I was like, you got symptoms that were interpreted as a particular illness. When you say you got sick, you're just reacting to symptoms. You could drink bleach and have symptoms, but it doesn't. If you let somebody interpret something other than the fact that you drunk bleach, then you're just removing your mind. So symptoms don't designate a specific illness. You still have to have that information interpreted through some kind of lens or medium, such as an institution. And that's where we go wrong at, because we have so far removed ourselves from just analyzing our own body and our own health as something that is our responsibility. That's our responsibility. Your body, the government didn't create your body, so they shouldn't tell you how it works. But you're giving the government this godlike ability over your health that they just took because they hold hostage the things you love in the world.
All right. And we're gonna start landing the plane, and we got K Polymath here trolling us. He says we're idolaters to health, right? Like if you think practicing good health is your salvation, I was like, okay, cool. Well, it's not exactly what we said, but
Nah, that's not what we said at all. Honestly, just having your mind renewed in the right things. Actually, health is a byproduct of having a renewed logical mind. Just to keep it on a very practical level, having a logical mind and a critically thinking mind is how you assume good health practices, because you're not easily deceived by propaganda and lies and deceptions and false knowledge. And you're kind of in a, like, for me, health is something you can reverse engineer. You can simply say, hey, I feel better when I drink water. So you realize that drinking water, makes you feel better. Or when I eat a lot of processed food, I feel worse. And so you can just kind of trial and error and reverse engineer your own life through experience. That's the most basic thing before you even come to a higher plane of thinking. Just, are you even critically thinking your own reality? Trial and error, reverse engineering things that work and things that don't, and just kind of using experience as your teacher. People don't even do that. And that's basic. Children do that. Like if running maybe hit my knee on the door, I'm going to think the second time about running. Like I hit my toe really bad because I was running in the house, and then my parents said, "Stop running in the house." I didn't believe them until I hit my toe, and now I'm like, "Oh, my parents are onto something."
Indeed. And you know what? It's been great, Spiritual Logic, and always welcome. Thanks for. I believe you. I think you shared the
Yeah.
video, and but definitely appreciate it. Thanks for coming
Hey,
through.
it's a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me up, man. You one of the deepest thinking brothers out here, and definitely critical thinking, and just people who are not afraid to just question things, are definitely needed in a time of just conformity and mindlessness that's going on, man. We have to start critically thinking through our own reality instead of allowing these criminals to think for us.
Couldn't have said it better. Tomorrow, I'll be here talking about Ado's faces and Ado's interests, right? Do Ado's faces mean Ado's interests, right? We're just going to talk about something simple, which is political representation, right? What the hell does that really mean, right? And there's a certain kind of a notion out there that, ethnic representation means, or just an ethnic face in a particular place in government means that you're now good, right? And what does it even mean for that ethnic group to have actual interests? Did they define it? Did the ethnic group meet together and define their interests? And anyways, ladies and gentlemen, it's been real. Thank you, Spiritual Logic.
All right.
Peace.
Thank you. Peace.
in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble from LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons will breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest and the righteous in your corners.
Frequent darkness in internal conversation. While the factions should now so pick up the weapon. Many actions backed by dubious motivation. Many wolves seeking sheepish coronation. With the preachers ringing outstanding ovation. Give me the tool and make me dash them with